All right, Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of our special Saturday Irish Breakdown podcast. My name is Brian Driscoll. I'm the publisher at IrishBreakdown.com, joined by my man Sean Davis, who is a recruiting analyst at Irish Breakdown, also the host of the Lucky Lefty podcast, of which I do not speak for, by the way. Just want to throw that out there because I get approached a lot about, did you hear what Sean said? What's your thoughts? I'm like, Sean's that's a grown man. Speak for himself. But let's, Sean, we have a really interesting topic today, and I want to get to it. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll get into some of the coaching press conference stuff at the end of it because I know you have some thoughts. I have some thoughts.
Right.
It was very weak. I mean, we met up after that. Just a lot of excitement about what the staff is doing and what it's putting together. But now that the staff is together, I think there's a lot of energy, a lot of excitement. You and I are both fired up about just what the staff is going to look like. However, the responsibilities are going to be different for each coach, and the level of toughness early on compared to later is going to be different. And a big key to this is getting this whole staff to be working towards one direction, right? Because you've got 10 coaches, assistant coaches with 10 different career goals. But how do you, and that's fine. I mean, Marcus Freeman's had career goals when he was an assistant and different things. But how do you, the best head coaches to me can amplify that while also saying, but while you're here, this is what our primary focus is. And you're going to get those jobs because you focus on this right here. And that's going to be the first big task for Coach Freeman, is to get this staff together in that regards. And that's true anytime you have an amount of coaching turnover that Notre Dame's had. 7 new assistants. We came into this offseason thinking there was going to be like 3. Right. And then, a D coordinator replace him, 7 new assistants. And so I think in a lot of ways that's good for Marcus Freeman, but it also presents unique challenges that otherwise weren't going to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at these 7 coaches, Sean, what we decided to do for this show is to rank them last of, basically easiest to toughest, least important, most important. I hate the terminology because I feel like they all have important jobs, right? But the level of difficulty for some is going to be different than others. And that's just the reality of it, right? Like, I don't care who you hired as the tight ends coach. When you walk into a room with 6 dudes and, one of them's Michael Mayer, your job's going to be a little tougher than what another coach may be stepping into, right?
Like we're in the midst of the Olympics, right?
Right.
So it's like, somebody might be doing a triple axel, which is very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
And you might have somebody that has to do a quadruple. And if they get it done, it doesn't make the other job less impressive or less meaningful.
Right.
It's just
the degree of difficulty has been amped up.
Yep.
Right.
Perfect.
And the focus for this is going to be immediate. Now, within that conversation, we may discuss, long term, he's got to repair the roster a little bit. But right now, for 2022, which is our focus, this job is hard, tough, whatever the case may be. And sometimes it can be flipped. Like, hey, this guy's got a great situation 2-3 years down the road, but right now all those dudes are young, and and here's the situation. So what we looked at are a lot of different factors. Number one, the current depth chart, the level of experience coming back, the level of production coming back in regards to importance plus toughness. Is the coach simply keeping something rolling, or does he have to change course? Is there a culture shift that's needed? Is there improvements that have to be made? Like, we try to take this all encompassing and make a big picture, which then allows a little bit of discussion. So we're going to go through a 7 that's sort of just kind of the order that we decided to go in. But there was some, not disagreement, but some tough calls to make, Sean, as we put this list together.
Yeah.
So let's get rocking and rolling, and we're gonna talk about 2 coaches at first. So again, we're gonna talk about the guys that have, I would say, are stepping into. This is a great way of saying it, Sean. Stepping into the best immediate situations. How about that? Because I hate that. That's the thing I've been wrestling with all week, is like the least important, least toughest. Like, it's not doing justice, and it's a disservice to the job these guys have to do, right?
Yeah.
But so I say that they're stepping into the best situation, and it's twofold. And you and I could not pick between the 2, so we're just going to talk about them together. And that is running backs coach Dylan McCullough and tight ends coach Jared Parker. I think they're clearly walking into the best situation, Sean. And these are the 2 guys that I would say your task number 1. Keep this thing rolling.
Yeah. Well,
what are your thoughts?
with the running backs for me, and just having a chance to meet both guys on Wednesday, and I spoke to you and I said immediately I felt the presence of McCullough, just the presence he has when he talks, the respect he demands. You can feel how he's going to impact the young guys in the running back room. Chris Tyree is your veteran, but one of the things I did ask him is, yo, you have diverse styles in the running back room and multiple sizes. And he answered that in saying, if I had a running back room that I would ask for, this is the one that I would want, just like this, with those styles that we asked him about. So the challenge for him, and the one thing he said was, they will be better by the time the spring game.
Yeah.
So those are the expectations he's setting. And I think he's already garnered the respect of the young guys. You know, this is just me, but just from the still shots and certain things you've seen, it just looks like the guys are really putting in work. It seems like Audrey Estime is really putting in work. And I think they've been motivated if you've been paying attention to their social media. So, and that was without having a running back coach. They were motivated to get better. So you put him into the mix, and I think he starts to change the attitude of the room just a little bit. And what I mean by that is, we don't know quite yet if Chris Tyree is a leader like Kyron Williams was a leader and someone to look up to for young running backs. So until we figure that out, it's good to have a guy like Delon McCullough that you know is flat out a leader of men in that running back room, and somebody they can gravitate to. And when they go through tough times, somebody they can lean on without question, knowing that he's making them better on a daily basis. And just to be honest, even with the offensive line struggles in previous years, the last 2 years, you would say, the Notre Dame running game, maybe not average yard per carry, but that's still been what Notre Dame has leaned on or tried to build its offense around. Wasn't as successful last year, and that trend is going to continue.
For me, Sean, when I look at Coach McCullough, because you actually had him 7th and Parker 6th, I had Parker 7th and Coach McCullough 6th.
Yep.
And the reason that I went with Coach McCullough is because he technically doesn't have a returning starter coming back, whereas Jared Parker does.
That's a good point.
And so, you know, he can develop a Michael Mayer type, perhaps. There's some talent there, but he's not walking into Michael Mayer being there and being ready to play.
Yeah.
And that was the thing for me. But the interesting thing is, and the reason also I went with Coach McCullough is because I do think there's work to be done with whoever the starter is going to be, where with Michael Mayer, it's just, hey, let's nuance some things, but the dude, he's already a dude, right? Like, it's just don't screw him up, right? Make him better, but don't screw him up. His job, you know, Coach Parker's job is going to be more for where I would say is Coach Parker's job is going to be harder beyond 2022.
Yeah.
Where Coach McCullough's got a more challenging task, immediate challenging task, but he's got a bunch of dudes that are going to be back. His dude in 22 most likely will be back in 23, right? Unless Chris Tyree just goes off this year, which is possible,
it's
right?
Possible, yeah.
So, but we anticipate all those guys coming back. And if somebody doesn't come back, it's most likely because they got buried and they transfer. Well, that's fine. Just slide Jadarian Price into that situation. You got Cedric Irvin coming in. So that's kind of why I went with Parker 7 and Coach McCullough 6. But when you look at Coach McCullough, the comments I'm about to say are not an indictment of Lance Taylor or a shot at Lance Taylor. It's a reality of when you lose your star who took a bulk of your carries, which they did in Kyron Williams. And you've got a junior who is, you know, I think hopefully on the verge of a breakout season. And then you got 2 sophomores that are still, you know, evolving their game, and Audric Estime and Logan Diggs, plus an incoming freshman. So Coach McCullough actually has a lot of youth in his group. I don't view youth, however, at running back the same way I do youth at D-line, offensive line, quarterback, right? Because you and I have discussed this before. I don't know if we've ever discussed it on the show, but, you know, running back's one of those positions where you can step in day one, and if you got the chops, you can play.
And we've seen that at Notre Dame.
Right.
The freshmen come in, whether immediately, like a Darius Walker in game 3, or even further down the schedule, game
like
5.
Josh Adams.
Adams. You know, guys come in and they're able to hit the ground running.
And when Chris Tyree was actually given an opportunity in 2020,
Right.
he was pretty good.
Yeah.
When he wasn't just giving Kyron a breather, he was pretty good.
Yeah.
Maybe they might have wanted to give Kyron a breather before the fourth quarter when Chris took his first carry, 21 yards against the first team Clemson defense, by the way, and cut it back and outran him for a 21-yard touchdown. I'm just hypothetically speaking, right? But we saw that with Logan Diggs this year. Yeah. Guy doesn't play a snap all season, steps in against Virginia Tech and makes big plays, including on the game-winning drive at the end of the game. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
He walks into a good situation from a talent standpoint, from a depth standpoint. There's a chance Sebo Flemister could come back next year, which I would love to see, because I think he adds also a different style to that, and he would make that a really good running back room. But even if Sebo's not brought back, this is a good running back room. But it's young. They have technical improvements to make. And this isn't Lance Taylor's fault, so be clear on that. But there's some bad habits he's going to have to break from the running backs because of the line they ran behind last year. We saw that with Logan Diggs in the bowl game.
I'm glad
he was kind of like catching the ball, like waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's not what Logan Diggs did in high school. Logan was a patient runner, but he was a decisive runner in high school. I think him and Kyron Williams both developed some bad habits running behind that offensive line. It was necessary bad habits, right? And yes, it resulted in some cutback big plays, but that's not what you want your running back doing snap after snap after snap. And if you think about like just all the impressive runs that Kyron Williams had last year and big runs and great plays and things like that, but then you look at his numbers, Sean, and his numbers weren't all that impressive. I mean, again, just looking at the numbers out of context, he 1,005 yards in 12 games and averaged 4.9 yards a carry. And 4.9 yards per carry in today's era is not good.
No.
Now, again, that meant there was a lot of negatives. There was a lot of zeros. And because of that, it was because of the line, not Kyron, not Logan, not Tyree. It was to me a line problem. You saw them develop some bad habits that allowed them to make the plays they did make. Like if without those bad habits, Kyron Williams doesn't run for 90-some yards for a touchdown against North Carolina, right? So, I mean, again, these aren't criticisms. These are realities. But you don't want that all the time because the efficiency at the position takes a big hit. And that's where I'm pointing to at the 4.9 yards per carry with Kyron is the efficiency took a big hit because they had to, that is also it's going to result in a 90-plus yard touchdown, but it's also going to result in a couple -3s. Where normally you'd say you should get a +2.
Right.
So with the Harry Hiestand offensive line, and this is going to be Coach McCullough and Coach Hiestand, I guarantee you're going to be constantly saying this to the backs is stay on track, right? Stay on your track. There will be a time and a place to do some magic, but stay on the track. Be more patient. Trust your blockers. And that's going to be the biggest thing Coach McCullough is going to have to get ingrained in the minds of his running backs after what they went through last year is trust your blockers. Trust, because it wasn't just games, Sean. Me and you talk after, and Vince, we would talk after practices last year, and you're like, dude, they're like getting hit 3-4 yards behind the line of scrimmage, every single practice. And then like, well, maybe it's just the highlight plays. And then we talk to sources and like, nope, that's happening all the time. They're getting dominated by the defense. Well, when that's happening every single time, you're going to develop bad habits. So that is to me why I kind of look at Coach McCullough and why, to a degree, I almost wanted to put him up a little bit more.
You could have moved him up, yeah.
And so, I even thought about like maybe moving him ahead of Al Golden, right, and Al Washington, because the talent is there, but there's some bad habits to break. But the reason I kept him 6 is because at the end of the day, those bad habits are going to primarily get broken because of what Harry Hiestand does.
Yeah.
Not so much as much as what Coach McCullough does.
Right?
So that's not taken away from him because Coach McCullough can beat into their heads this, and this. But if the line's still getting their butts whooped, then it won't matter. They're still going to have those bad habits because it's not like Lance Taylor taught that. It was a necessary evil based on the play of the offensive line. And so to me, that's why I went with Coach McCullough. With Coach Parker, Sean, I think his task is going to be a lot tougher in 2023 and beyond because I don't think there's a clear line of succession at tight end. There's some really talented guys, Eli Raritan, Holden Stace, but Kane Barong, but you've got Kane with a knee injury. Kevin Bauman's never been that guy. And I liked Kevin Bauman coming out, but Kevin Bauman always struck me as a number 2, not a number 1.
Number 1. Eli Raritan is coming off an injury. So
right. He's another one. So his tough task is going to be developing that number 2 and that number 3. but his tougher task is he's going to move way up the list in 2023. He'll be in the top 3 in 2023 when it comes to toughest tasks on the staff, in my opinion.
Unless he lands a Michael Mayer type.
Well, yeah, I mean, but right now Notre Dame's not recruiting a tight end beyond
right.
Cooper Flanagan in the 2023 class. It's going to be about developing Raritan, developing Holden Stace, developing Kane Barong. You know, it's getting that group, the guys that are going to be on the roster in the fall. But I mean, those guys are going to be tasked with filling some big flipping shoes, Sean.
Yeah.
You know, but right now, Coach Parker's job is a little bit easier compared to others, and that's why I had him 7th. It's because it's like with Michael Mayer, it's like, man, you know, come on now. But he does have an important task because you've got to get the 2 and the 3 because they're still going to run 12 and 13 personnel next year.
But
you know,
that's the comfort, right? To have a guy that gives you time to work with those guys that are under him this year and develop them so that when he leaves next year, that those young guys are ready to take the reins and go ahead and be just as productive.
Right.
Maybe not, you know, singularly
as a unit, right?
As a unit.
Right. Because tight end production in Notre Dame is going to be important no matter who the tight end is.
Oh, absolutely.
In just some years, it may be 2 or 3 guys splitting up those reps. And
I'm glad you mentioned that. Let me ask you a question. From a coaching standpoint, and this is just to go back to McCullough for a second. From a coaching standpoint, because of that offensive line, we saw the urgency of the young running backs having to be able to pass block and pick up blitzes. And for the most part, they did a pretty good job. They didn't leak as much as you might think youngsters would.
Right.
So now coming into their second year with a better offensive line, does that give them an added advantage to be used more in the passing game? And maybe we see more from them in the passing game because there's not so much of an urgency to say, look, we have to keep you guys in to help this offensive line to chip and do other things. Or does that matter in how they develop, especially the young guys?
I don't know if I would say that the experience last year would help them as much with that as it's that alone, as it's that plus just the fact that I think with Tyree and especially Diggs and Tyree, especially those two, I think they came to Notre Dame with pass rush or pass game potential, right? And to your point, it's like what I thought Tommy did a really good job of in the bowl game is saying, look, they've got a really good pass rush and they like the blitz. So instead of max proing all the time, I think this is kind of where you're going to, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong. Hey, let's do some things where we just get the back out and go empty. And then they're going to try to outnumber us with a pressure. Let's outnumber them on the perimeter with our skill players.
Yeah.
And I love that. And that's why Chris Tyree had that long touchdown. It's like, hey, most teams in that situation, when they show that max blitz, they walk up, they check to a max pro. They bring one of the tight ends in, they keep the back in, they're going to block at least 6 or 7 and then hope that they can get the ball out. Well, that's fine, but that's a real old school way of looking at it. You know, I'm a believer that when you're spreading the field, there needs to be a time where max pro is important, but I like calling a max pro, not checking to a max pro.
Yeah.
Right. And so in that situation, you know, they brought the blitz and Jack Cohn audibled, but he audibled to an empty back set. He released Chris Tyree. And the players talk about it, like you and I talked. Yeah. Right. When they show this is what you're checking to. Bam, get it out, 50-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
That's great preparation. And so I think you got to mix that up. But that doesn't work if you don't have a back that can scare teams like Chris Tyree. That doesn't work if you don't have a back like Logan Diggs, who against Georgia Tech, or was it Navy, can catch a screen, make a dude miss, and take that thing to the house, right? Like they are legitimate pass game weapons. And so you have to have that. Otherwise, I mean, you can scheme all you want, but if those guys can't catch. But I also think that their experience last year in pass protection should make them a more effective pass blocking unit, pass protecting unit, which if you've got backs that can really pass pro, that can be a big blitz discourager, right? Like, because if you're afraid your blitz is going to hit home, you're not going to want to blitz.
Yeah.
Because a blitz that doesn't hit home usually means big play for the other team. And so if you've got like Logan Diggs and Chris Tyree and Audric Estime as like really good third down, you know, especially on third down, but really good pass blockers, you're going to be a lot less prone to blitz because you don't want to get caught like, okay, now we're caught going one-on-one with all these guys and we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So I think that could be beneficial as well. But to your point, though, when we talk about this discussion is, I mean, he's inheriting, Coach McCullough's inheriting a young group.
Yeah.
But it's not an unproven group. It's not a group that hasn't played.
Not at all. And that's one of the reasons why, I now thinking back on it, Notre Dame is known for being able to get young running backs to come in and produce.
It's one of the few positions we've seen that. Now, honestly, a lot of times it's been out of necessity, which it's a whole different conversation for a different day.
Yeah.
Josh Adams doesn't play a lot if Torian Folsom doesn't get hurt.
Yeah.
Logan doesn't play last year if Chris Tyree doesn't get hurt, but whatever. They were ready to play. I don't blame the running back coaches for that.
No. That's a whole nother story. Is there a need, in your opinion? Because I just thought about this. Do you need to identify, or if you do, if your answer is yes, give me a point from now to August where you need to identify the workhorse.
I don't think you need a workhorse.
Okay.
I don't think you do.
You don't need to go into the horseshoe with a Kyron Williams.
No.
Cal type of guy.
No,
okay.
I think if you're doing that, you're not taking advantage of this group. Now, you where I will say, now my response to you, Sean, is from a volume standpoint, not from what your calls are. I think, yeah, between Logan and Audric, those two guys are going to handle some of the workhorse type of runs.
Yeah.
Even though they may not have the workhorse type of touches. My hope, and I'm going to have an article coming out about this here soon, is you as a coach have to figure out how to use all those guys properly. I'm not a believer that you need one guy. I think the way that Notre Dame handled their running back situation the last 2 years has been a mistake. And, the reasons, I mean, I look at other teams and I look at Oklahoma. I mean, there's been years where Oklahoma's had some great offenses with two backs that get a lot of touches. And you get to the end of the year, and those guys are pretty fresh down the stretch because of that. I mean, you look at the Oklahoma or the Georgia team that beat Notre Dame in 2017. I've said to people, you know how many times that year in 15 games, Sonny Michel had at least 20 carries in the game?
One.
And it was 20.
Heck, you can look at the Georgia team this year.
Because it was him and Sonny Michel. Right.
Yeah.
George, that's even better example.
3 backs. Yeah. And they used all of their styles to effectively empower the running game.
Right. I mean, Georgia averaged 191 yards per game this year. They had an 800-yard runner, a 700-yard runner, a 300-yard runner, a 200-yard runner. Plus, then you look at James Cook, who had 700 yards as a rusher.
As a rusher, yeah.
But then James Cook also has 284 yards as a pass. He has 1,000 yards of offense this year.
Yeah.
I mean, and even though he wasn't their leading rusher, he was their leading yards guy out of the backfield.
Yeah.
He had 2 guys with almost 1,000 yards. Zamir was about over a little because he was like no weapon in the pass game whatsoever. But you look at the backs and look, they had a lot of injuries at receiver this year. Because this is what people talk, oh, man, they had injuries. Notre Dame's got probably receivers. Look, the national champions this year, right? James Cook has 27 catches for 284 yards. Kenny McIntosh, another running back, has 22 catches for 242 yards. Zamir White has 9 catches for 75 yards. I mean, you look at that. Milton had 2 catches. So, I mean, I'm trying to do quick math in my head. That's 49. That's 58. That's over 60 catches by your backs. And they also had, one of the best tight ends in the country this year in Brock Bowers. So, I mean, that's the thing is in today's game, the backs are so much more of a part of the pass game than they used to be. I mean, it used to be where the Roger Craigs and the Marshall Falks were anomalies. I think you're seeing more and more of the need for that. But that's how you use your whole back. Georgia didn't have a guy.
Yeah.
They had 4, right? Now you've got it's not always easy getting all those guys involved, but that's going to be the task that Tommy Rees and Dylan McCullough are going to have. So that's a kind of another reason you could make a case for Dylan being ahead of Coach Parker, in my opinion. And that's part of the reason I had him involved.
A lot of people talk about the tight end working with the receivers in tandem as far as the passing game. But that tight end affects the matchups with the running backs just as much in the passing game. So when you have a guy like Brock Bowers or Michael Mayer that demands that much attention in the middle of the field, that's why you see a guy like Cook, James Cook, getting big wheel routes, flat plays, arrow routes, just wide open because of that attention that the tight end demands. So I'm very interested in seeing not only They work in concert. So I'm interested in seeing what Tommy and Dylan can come up with in conversation to say, okay, this is what we want to do. What combination or what guys do you think fit what needs to be done in this formation from this look, so on and so forth? And something you talked about last year that you wanted to see more of, which was Chris and Kyron in the game at the same time. They have an opportunity to have those same type of combinations with Chris and any one of the other running backs in the situation. So when you think about what he has in that room, like he said it himself, it's a dream. Before he even took the job and met the young men in the running back room, he walked into something that he would say, this is what I want if I had my perfect running back room as far as style and size with the guys that I have. So it's a very good situation, and I understand why you have him elevated just a little bit above Parker.
Next, you kind of get into. I think there's two guys that you could say are somewhat interchangeable.
Yeah,
I'm going to go with Al Golden next, and I thought of putting Al Washington there, but here's why I went there. Because Al Washington's job is going to make Al Golden's harder or tougher. So the job that Al Washington does, developing the defensive line, is going to largely determine a lot of what Al Golden's able to do as defensive coordinator. So whereas if there's only so much there's only so much that like a defensive coordinator can do if a there's only so much a defensive coordinator can do if his defensive line is not dominant, right?
Yeah.
And so because this is part of like, in my opinion, sort of a, I'm trying to think how to say this, Sean, because we talked about importance plus difficulty, and the importance plus difficulty is what does it for me. Because if Al Golden's a great defensive coordinator, but Al Washington doesn't do a good job, then it's going to bring down what Al Golden does. If Al Golden's just a solid defensive coordinator, but Al Washington's a great defensive line coach, it's going to lift up Al Golden. A defensive line, it's like the offensive line, right? Like Dylan McCullough could do a great job, but if Harry Heastand doesn't do a great job, it doesn't matter how good of a job Dylan McCullough does, right? If your defensive line's not dominant, you're in trouble, and you're in trouble, So I think that's kind of why I went with it, because also I think the thing that helps Al Golden is he's going to have Marcus Freeman there to kind of help with that transition as well. And so I feel like that's going to make for a much easier transition for Al Golden. And I've always felt a coordinator is only as good as his assistant coaches. And this is the argument we made about Tommy Rees last year. People want to bang on Tommy Rees for the offense. I'm like, first of all, the offense actually was pretty decent for chunks of the year. There's a couple games they didn't play well, but when you're an offensive coordinator, I don't care how good you are. If your O-line coach isn't doing the job and your receivers coach isn't doing the job, there's not a whole lot of tools in your tool belt that you can go to, right? And that to me is kind of why I have the coordinator a little bit lower. Is Al Washington's being tasked with, kind of stepping into a situation where he's got some really good players coming back, and you could make the case that maybe he should be lower. But I think the fact that he lost two captains and the fact that the D-line was good last year, like really good at times, but this D-line, I think the D-line was really good last year. The D-line needs to be great this year. And getting a group from really good to great is not an easy task, especially when you lose two captains.
A lot of times it's the most difficult.
Right. And so that is a difficult task for me.
Yeah.
The fact that he has four guys compared to one, like the running backs and the tight ends, really factors into it as well. But so that's why I went with Al Washington ahead of Al Golden, is because I feel like the presence of Marcus Freeman to help with that transition. I think Al Golden's experience is gonna make it a little bit of maybe an easier job for him, whereas Al Washington's going back to the defensive line for the first time in 5 years.
Yeah.
So, there's a transition there. And so that's why Al Golden was next for me. It's not saying that his job is going to be easy. None of these jobs are going to be easy because you're trying to win a national championship. So all these jobs are important, but I just feel like the D coordinator is more dependent on the assistant coaches, in my opinion, in regards to getting his unit. And that unit, the Al Washington's unit, to me, is going to have the biggest role on every other position group on defense, regardless of what Mike Mickens or Chris O'Leary or Al Golden does. So that's why I went with Al Washington ahead of Al Golden. And it's not that I don't think Coach Golden has a tough task, because I think he does, because he has to get this defense to another level.
Yeah.
I think Marcus Freeman had this defense, and we're going to talk more specifically about this in future shows, but Marcus Freeman did some really good things with the defense last year. There was some inconsistency because of personnel and, trying to overcome some things from the past and all that kind of stuff. But for a big chunk of the year, the defense played pretty good. But the goal is always going to be, and even if Marcus Freeman was coming back, the goal would be the same. It would be, but they've got to be great. And I don't think the defense was great last year. And the way that the season ended was just evidence of that, right?
Yeah.
So there's some things you got to fix. And for if you're Al Golden, so this is kind of where we get to the first two jobs are I think there's some space between 5 and 6, or 6 and 7, and then the rest. And I think Al Golden's task is going to be, you've got to make this a great defense. The reason I have him 5, however, is because it's not just him.
No.
It's Marcus Freeman's going to be there, Al Washington, Mike Mickens, Chris O'Leary, James Laurinaitis. You've got a lot of guys coming back on defense. So I think that's why I have him 5, Sean. I don't know where you placed Coach Golden.
Well, I can see both sides. For me, Al Washington, I'll speak to, sitting with him in the breakout session and hearing him talk about the guys and what he knows about them from the limited time. He's been very impressed with the younger guys. He mentioned Gabriel Rubio. And of course, he knows guys like Jason Adamiola and the other guys that have put in time. He also mentioned Riley Mills. I'm interested in seeing how he deploys these guys.
Right.
Because we've talked about it. In order for them to be great, what has to improve immediately? It's the run defense.
Mm-hmm.
It has to become more dominant. You have to get under 100 yards a game. As far as giving that up, you would prefer.
Right.
You get under 100 yards per game. That puts you on par with most championship level teams.
Right.
Now, from that standpoint, what he does have, in my opinion, and we talked about this, we had a phone call the other day, and we were talking about the struggles of Ohio State recently. And I said, how much is that tied into not having that dude as a pass rusher, like they were able to lean on?
Right.
3 guys for like 9 years. Like when you have Bosa, Chase Young for 9 years, that covers up a lot of blemishes.
Yeah.
That might exist in the defense. So he has a guy in Isaiah Foskey. So for me, that might cover up a few blemishes early on, because with a new defensive coordinator coming in, like we saw with Marcus Freeman the first 2 games, you saw some missed assignments. You saw some things, and then all of a sudden, by the time they got to Wisconsin, you start to see them get locked in as a defense. And then for the majority of the rest of the season, you saw what that defense would be and what they were. I think it's going to be the same way. Hopefully, they won't go out and give, 38 points up week 1 in the horseshoe. You want them to give up. If they give up between 20 to 28 points in that game,
that's an elite performance against Ohio State.
Absolutely. So that's what you're looking for. And if they're going to be a great defense, it has to start first game.
Right.
It has to start. Now, my question with you, or my comment to kind of back up what you're saying, it's not just about with Al Golden. It's not just about Al Washington, because there are some questions in that defensive backfield as well that Mike Mickens and Chris O'Leary have to answer.
Right. And we'll get to the returning coaches
Exactly.
down the road. Yeah.
But what they're dealing with also impacts Al Golden. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just Al
Right.
Washington. And then, you have this influx of young talent at the linebackers. You know, does Al Golden feel like, man, I really need to get these guys on the field?
I
Or does
think
he
that,
lean on
Sean,
the
is going to
veteran?
be that right there is going to be the tougher part of Al Golden's job
Yeah,
is getting the linebacking core going, not the coordinating part.
yeah, yeah.
Because I think the corners were exposed in the two biggest games of the year, right? Or
Mhm.
Clarence Lewis was,
Yeah.
right? The Cincinnati game and then the Oklahoma State game. But the corner play was okay most of the year. When Notre Dame had some trouble in other games, USC, North Carolina, it was the linebackers
Very much so.
that were more the problem. And also in the championship game. So I think that, to me, his biggest task for me, I mean, it's going to be like, get this group to tackle better. I mean, that's like the biggest thing for me. Tackle better, and all of a sudden you're going to see a big jump in production just from that.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be the hardest part of his task, but I still go with Al Washington ahead of that because, again, great linebackers can't overcome a bad D-line. A great D-line can help overcome a bad linebackers. Now, I don't think Notre Dame's going to be bad at both. I'm just making a point that it still comes down to the D-line for me.
So with the linebacking core from last year, if that D-line had been great in front of them, would they have been better?
Yes. Well, no, they wouldn't have been better. They would have been exposed as much. So if one of the things we've talked about with Jason Adamiola, for example, he's got to do a better job of finishing on the ball.
Absolutely.
And there's times where the linebackers gave up a miss, but if you make your play 4 yards behind the line, that it doesn't matter what the linebackers do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, and like you talked about, like Foskey.
That's the same development, just to back you up on that point. It's the same development we saw Jerry Tillery make.
Right.
His last year in Notre Dame.
As a pass rusher. But he didn't make that as a run defender. Right. And that's, to me, where Jason, I think, can end up being a better all-around player than Jerry. He'll never be a first-round pick because he's not 6'6", 300 pounds, right? But I think Jason has a chance to be a better player than Jerry was. Because in a lot of Jerry's production that year was built around the Stanford game. He finished with 8.5 sacks. Like 4 of them came against Stanford.
In that game,
right? Yeah. So for me, Sean, when I look at it, you mentioned Foskey. Yes, he had that dude. They had that dude at Ohio State, right? It was Joey Bosa, then Nick Bosa, and then Chase Young. But Isaiah Foskey's not on that level yet. And that's where I come down to it, is I think Jason Adamiola could be better than Jerry Tillery. It's not yet. I think Isaiah Foskey can be the best. Him and Will Anderson can be in sort of a battle all season for who's the best defensive end in college football.
Mm-hmm.
I think he can be that player, but he's not there yet.
Right.
And that's why I think Al Washington has an important task, because if you can't get those guys to that level, then there's greater opportunities for you to get exposed to those other positions. And that's going to be a key for Al Washington and Al Golden is, okay, let's make sure we utilize these. As much as I love what Marcus Freeman did last year, the one thing I complained about all year was they dropped Isaiah Foskey in coverage too much.
Way too much.
Way
too much.
And I want to see that get corrected this year a little bit. So that's going to be the thing for me is, Sean, is the both of those guys have tough tasks, but the reason I go with Al, and I think a case could be made that Al Washington should be below Al Golden, but the reason I'm going with Al Washington is, again, because he is the guy that's primarily responsible for getting those guys to that level. Because here's the thing I'll say. Al Golden and Marcus Freeman are not idiots. And if Isaiah Foskey was a consistently dominant player the way Will Anderson was last year, he wouldn't have dropped him in coverage as much.
No.
But, Isaiah was a money pass rusher, right? I mean, he came up with big plays when you needed it. His consistency of dominance wasn't always there, especially in the run game. Now, he got better as the year went on. But I think this is the scary thing about Isaiah Foskey. There's a whole nother level that he can get to.
Absolutely.
Same with Jason Adamiola. And they've got to get to it. That's the key. They've got to get to it. And that's the task that Al Washington has this year, is beyond. I mean, look, it's great. Getting Riley Mills going is important. Getting Jacob Lacey back on track is important. Getting Gabriel Rubio healthy, Aiden Keanaaina. I mean, those are all important things, right? Get Tyson Ford and Nathan Gobira ready to help out as freshmen, right? Those are all important tasks. But at the end of the day, the greatness of this line is still going to be determined by Jason Adamiola and Isaiah Foskey.
Yeah.
Right. And look, we know what Justin Adamiola is going to do. Right.
Right.
He's going to show up every day and give you everything he's got. He's going to, in his I expect his production to go up this year too. He's got to do a better job. He missed 3 or 4 sack opportunities last year, which is kind of crazy when you think about what his production was and the amount of snaps he took, right? Like that dude was a pretty high volume, highly effective pass rusher on number of snaps. But again, you got to finish better at the ball.
Are you expecting a big jump or whatever type of jump from Nana? Or do you think it's like, okay, we know who he is?
I think he can improve, but I don't expect a big jump.
Okay.
I think the guys capable of making big jumps are Jason Adamiola, and Isaiah's big jump won't necessarily manifest itself in sacks.
No.
It might, but where Isaiah's jump is gonna come from, in my opinion, is more tackles for loss, but more overall team sacks. Because what's going to happen is Isaiah is going to be so good that you've got to double him and you're sliding your protections for him. And all of a sudden, Justin Adamiola's got 9 sacks.
Right.
And Riley Mills has 7 sacks. And Jason Adamiola's got 7 sacks. And Jacob Lacey's got 4 sacks. You know what I mean? Like it's your linebackers have combined 9 sacks this year because they're so freaking worried about, they're sliding there because Jason Adamiola and Isaiah Foskey are going to be on the same side of the line a lot. Yeah. The Viper and the 3 technique are on the same side of the line a lot, which means you're going to get a lot of slide protections to that side, right? Which means, okay, let's have some fun with our blitzes away from it.
Yeah.
Right? Let's have some fun where, we're bringing some pressures. We're using them to manipulate the line to then bring a Maris Lewis-foul on a boundary blitz or a corner fire or something like that, There's all types of fun things you can do if Isaiah is that guy.
Sort of like Raheem Morris, and what Raheem Morris had a field day because he knew the Bengals were going to slide to Aaron Donald.
Yeah,
every play.
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, I'll put 3 guys on to the right of the center, and I'll just let 2 guys.
Which is why Aaron Donald didn't make a ton of plays until the end.
Yeah,
because then I was like, okay, guys, you've had your fun.
I'll take over.
I've got this.
Yeah.
No, I think you're absolutely right, but I don't think Isaiah didn't necessarily. He wasn't that kind of guy last year.
Mm-hmm. Is it a mentality thing for you?
No, it's experience thing. It's just an experience thing. It's he was a rotation guy the year before.
Yeah.
I think he's a kid that lost a lot. I mean, he was another guy that, remember, he was more of a tight end in high school than he was a defensive lineman. He played a lot more as an end as a senior, but I think he was another one of those younger players. His class especially got really hurt with COVID because they lost that first full offseason.
Yeah.
Of development. And so then Isaiah comes out in 2020 and he has his growth. And so he made a big jump. So I think it's just more about experience. I don't think it's talent, mentality. I think the mentality's there, which is why he was such a money pass rusher.
And he's made big plays even when he's on special teams.
That's what I mean by money pass rusher. Like you think of the blocked punt against Pitt.
Yeah.
He had a blocked punt against Stanford.
Yeah.
Or he recovered a blocked punt for a touchdown against Pitt.
Right.
And then he blocked the punt against Stanford that set up a touchdown by Justin Adams. Or he recovered it like the 1 and set up an offensive touchdown. But the thing about Isaiah is when he needs to make a play, he's going to make a play.
Yeah.
That's the mentality. For him, it's just the experience of how do you replicate that snap after snap after snap. I think that's the key for him. And I think also there's a need for him to develop his pass rushing repertoire, which is another tough task for Al Washington. How do you convince a kid that was on the verge of breaking the school's pass rushing record that your game needs a lot of work?
Yeah.
And if Isaiah embraces that, and look, I don't think Isaiah comes back if he's not willing to embrace that. Because if you think you're the deal, he'd have gone pro.
Yeah.
Like Isaiah strikes me as a worker. He just always has struck me as a worker.
Yeah, and he strikes me as somebody, when you see guys like that come back, they have a clear plan of what they want to do on the football field. Mm-hmm. They know this is how I have to get better, and this is how I'm going to make my team better. Mm-hmm. Like he knows. There's no question. I don't think he needs any motivation from Al Washington. Like he knows. And hopefully he's going to take that and become a leader for guys like Aiden Gabera, Tyson Ford to grab hold to and say, this is the culture. And this is what we're doing along with Al Washington. And then you start to see the manifestation of that for the next 2 to 3 years along the defensive front, because that defensive front starts to play at a higher level. I mean, that's what I'm expecting. I think from a recruiting standpoint, we both agree that Al Washington, and not speaking negatively of what has been done, but it's a slight upgrade.
It has a chance to be a slight upgrade.
To be. Yeah. It has a chance to be a slight upgrade. And from a coaching standpoint, I will say this because you pointed it out. Yes, he is moving from linebacker. But one thing he said, I'm back in my comfort zone.
100%. I mean, that's why I've embraced the hire, Sean, is because this is his baby. You know, I've coached running backs, tight end, you know, but when you go back to like this, okay, this is my baby.
This is it.
You know, he didn't forget how to play D line. And let's be honest too, his greatest success as a coach was his 1 year coach in the defensive line of Boston College. I mean, Harold Landry had 22 and a half tackles for loss and 16 sacks that season.
Yeah.
He's the one guy on the roster that has developed a player that's put up the kind of game-changing production that, you know, we pray that Isaiah Foskey can put up is Al Washington, right? And so, and that year, Jared Allen was really good that year too. It wasn't like it was just Harold Landry and a bunch of nobodies. I mean, he had not Jared Allen, Jacob Allen, I think is who I always want to call him Jared Allen because he looks so much like Jared Allen, but that's obviously not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about, I think Zach Allen. Zach Allen is who I meant. But like he was pretty good that year too. And that was kind of his first year in the rotation. He had 10 tackles for loss that year. You know, they had another defensive end, Kevin Kovalik, who had 14 and a half tackles for loss that year. You had 3 defensive linemen with at least 10 tackles for loss, and you had another defensive lineman that had 6.5 tackles for loss that year. You know, so that was a heck of a year for BC. And the guy that was responsible for that, and if you look at the production the year before and the year after, the defensive line production wasn't as good the year before or the year after, especially from a sack standpoint. And so that defensive line was really good at getting to the quarterback. And just for context purposes, Notre Dame had its best pass rushing defense in over 20 years this year.
Yeah.
Had 41 sacks. Okay. And that was in 13 games. That 2016 Boston College defense had 47 sacks. And, you know, and the defensive linemen were a big part of that, with Harold Landry being the top guy. So, you know, if Notre Dame doesn't do a thing different this year, except their defensive linemen are better at making plays on the ball, you're going to see a 7, 8, 9 sack jump, in my opinion.
I want to see his impact on guys like Jacob Lacey and Howard Cross as well on the interior. That's what I'm going to be focusing on, how the interior of that defensive line is playing. And for me, I don't want to use this comp. I'm trying to think of somebody else maybe, but the player that Jason Ademilola can be on the interior, if he truly taps in to everything he can do, you talking about a late first, early second NFL draft pick. Like, he has that talent. He constantly gets into the backfield. He constantly is in place to make a play, like you said, on tackle for loss or in the hole before it gets to the linebackers. Now it's about finishing those plays, putting that in the stat column, and being more effective and being more impactful. What's the difference in between the rotation before we move on? Do you see the drop off with guys like Jacob Lacey, Howard Cross, Riley Mills, Aiden DeBar, or Tyson Ford? The depth being more talented and getting better. The rotation will probably be a little bit deeper.
I would hope so.
It'll be a little bit deeper,
especially in the games that you're expected to win. I mean, I think that's
heck yeah.
Yeah.
So that'll be impactful as well.
And we have to think about that when we talk about the production and compare it to other guys.
Yeah.
I don't know if Isaiah Foskey is going to play enough snaps this year to get 23 tackles for loss.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if, because when Sheldon had 15 and a half tackles for loss in 2015, Sheldon Day played a ton of snaps. I mean, a ton of snaps.
Yeah.
I hope Jason Ademilola doesn't get to 15 and a half tackles for loss because he doesn't play enough snaps to get there. It's about the impact, right? But that's to kind of bring it back to where we got to, that's the task in front of Al Golden, which is another, or Al Washington, which is another reason I have him a little higher than Al Golden. Why I strongly considered him making him 3, and we'll get to who number 3 is because it's what you just said. It's not just about Jason and Isaiah. He's got to get them to become stars, which can be challenging.
Yeah.
Right? It's not easy to do that, but he has a chance to get them to become stars, and he needs to get them to that level. But it also comes down to when you're a coach, it's also about, can you develop the depth chart to where you can have that kind of rotation. Just for context purposes, in 2015, Sheldon Day played 768 snaps. This past year, which is a lot of snaps.
That's a lot.
This past year, Notre Dame didn't have I don't believe a single defensive lineman that got to 600. Jason Adamula led the team with 592. That's almost 200 fewer snaps.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah.
I mean, that 200 snaps for a defensive lineman is like 3 games.
Yeah.
So again, but that's why you look at overall unit production, and Jacob Lacey's a kid that, to me, and we'll talk about this, Riley Mills and Jacob Lacey, to me, you've got to get Jason and Isaiah to be dudes, right? We've established that. But that's step 1. Step 2 is getting those other guys to emerge as impact players. And I think, to me, that's where Riley Mills and Jacob Lacey could really have an impact, because this is going to be a bold prediction that we can dive into more later. But if Al Washington meets expectations as a coach, it'll somewhat show up with Jason and Isaiah, but it's really going to show up with Riley and Jacob, because they have chances to be really, really good players.
Really good players.
Because Jacob should be healthy. He's now going to be another year removed from the shoulder surgery. He's going to be about 5-10 pounds heavier. I think Riley Mills has a chance to be a really good player.
Yeah. What you saw from Jacob Lacey, if fans will go back and watch the Wisconsin and the Purdue games, Jacob Lacey was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
That's when you saw
a 4th down stop against Wisconsin.
Absolutely.
He made that same play in the state championship game as a senior to beat Michael Mayer's team. It was a 4th down, and he just crushed a dude and made a play. I mean, so that ability is there. You love seeing it translate.
Yeah.
It's just about keeping him healthy.
Mm-hmm.
That's been Jacob's problem. And so you're going to need, that's where Al Golden comes into play, is how do you utilize him? Are you going to have him be a 2-gap guy all the time, or are you going to have him be a penetrator? If they use him as a penetrator, then I think he could really have an impactful year. And then Riley Mills is the other one.
Yeah.
I think he's got a chance to be a really, really good player. But the depth is going to be a key. And that's going to be the challenge in front of Al Washington, is getting that group going. So it's not going to be easy, because you've got to learn these guys. Where Mike Elson just knows, here, I know this, this guy's got to work on this and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
A new position coach comes in. He's got to learn. He's got to start from, you got to learn their personality. You've got to learn what works and what doesn't work. You may walk in thinking you're motivating this kid, but you just turned him off.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I always tell coaches, like, walk in and establish the rules and the ground rules immediately. But don't come in and start demanding players do certain things about their game until you've gotten to know them a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you got to know how to get them, I mean, that's the one thing I said as a coach, and I think every great coach I've ever been around says, look, I treat all my players fairly. I don't treat all my players the same. Because kids I've said this, I had a year where one of my best receiver was a kid that was an externally tough kid, was a little bit not tough on the inside in regards to how he handled men yelling at him because of his upbringing. And I had to learn to because he even asked me after his cruise, he was like, why did you treat me different than Curfew? And I explained it to him. Well, Curfew was one of my other receivers. His dad was like literally a drill sergeant. So Curfew only understood loud, direct, and it didn't bother him. He heard it as coaching. If I yelled at Nathan like that, he heard it as, this dude's attacking me. And they had another kid who was my best athlete, who was just a super flake. And so it's just like, he drove me nuts. But I had to figure out, like, how do you get these 3 completely different personalities all working the same goals? You can't treat them all the same.
No.
The standard is the same, right? The expectations are the same. The things I teach them are the same. But how I reached Nathan on an emotional level is going to be different than how I reached curfew and how I reached George and how I reached Greg and all my different, Kazin and all my different guys all had to be treated differently
Differently,
in
yeah.
how you connect to them. That's the challenge for guys like Al Washington. It's even greater because Dylan McCullough's got like maybe 5 dudes.
Right.
Al's got like, was it like 17 or 18 right now?
18 dudes, yeah.
Right. And it's a deep group. And so that is the challenge. That's what makes that challenge even tougher, is the deeper the room, honestly, the harder it can be to connect that way. And what often gets lost is that stuff is then going to manifest to how they play on Saturdays. Because if they don't trust you, if they don't respect you, if they don't believe in you as a coach, it's going to affect how they play on Saturday. But if you can connect with them all and build that trust and build that connection and fight through all that personal stuff, because the players respected the heck out of Mike Elston. That's the other challenge, is you're replacing a dude that the players loved. Now,
that's true.
A guy that I think you can improve upon as a coach, you can improve upon as a recruiter, but improving upon from a relationship standpoint, that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason why I really thought about putting Al Washington even higher on my list, especially when we get to number 3. And let's get to number 3. Brian Mason. Sean, when I said I have Brian Mason, yes, at 3rd, you said I thought about putting him higher. Explain why Brian Mason is walking into this with an important and challenging task beyond just you got to find a new punter and a new place kicker and a new holder. Besides that, what makes this such an important and challenging task for Brian Mason?
This task coming in and changing the narrative of fair catch you. Because that's what I call it. We're fair catch you. That's what we've been for like the last.
You said you wanted more U's at Notre Dame, Sean. You didn't say they had to all be positive.
That's fair. That one I don't like. So we need to change that U.
Positive U's.
Absolutely.
See, you're being a little hypocritical. You keep saying you want Notre Dame to be more than no U's, but then we anoint them as fair catch U, and you say you don't want them to be U anymore. So, I mean, come on, man. I mean, consistency.
But just thoroughly impressed. So let's go to the main press conference when he stood up before the media, and he was asked about his outlook. And he just talked about coming in and immediately having to make an impression on starters of how important it is for them to be a part of special teams. And knowing that now there is no break when we're practicing special teams. The starters aren't off on the sides or doing their own things. Everybody is going to be involved in the special teams part of practice. He has to come in and change the culture and the outlook on special teams because the focus really hasn't been there. And we stopped short of really like denigrating the job that certain coaches have done. But I just have to be flat out honest. Brian Polian didn't get the job done.
No.
As far as special teams, I know
he would always have like one unit that was really good or two, but he never put together. And honestly, the units that were good, it had a lot more to do with the athletes he had than it did him.
Which goes to, once again, the press conference when he was asked, well, when you look at the starters at Cincinnati and the snaps they played on special teams and the number of them that played on special teams, did it coincide with the same numbers at Notre Dame? And he flat out said no.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the media was looking for because it just got dead silent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you guys didn't see who was on the field?
Right.
The special teams unit?
It seemed like people were surprised when he explained that Notre Dame doesn't. Like, did you not look at all the walk-ons that Notre Dame had running down on kickoff and different things last year? Like, in punt team last year?
And so went on, and we go to the breakout session, and, he starts talking. And he immediately, he says, yo, Sauce Gardner was on kickoff, punt. Kobe Bryant was our gunner coming off the edge on field goal. Like, your guys have to be a part of that. And it has to be consistent to set the culture so that when guys come on campus as recruits, no matter how important they are, how many stars they've been ranked, they know I have to be a part of special teams.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't focus on being the best linebacker, being the best safety, being the best wide receiver, tight end. No. The door for me to get on that field, the first door I have to walk through is special teams.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the culture that he has to set at Notre Dame, because it previously has not been the culture. He immediately went into, look, this is what we're going to do. He gave us the goals. He gave us the net yardage he wants to average on punt coverage. He gave us the net average his punter needs to average. He gave us the number of field goals he needs blocked. He gave us the number of punts he needs blocked. Goals have been set. Expectations have been set. What you just said, Brian, the standard. He set the standard. And the standard is far above what it's been as far as special teams at Notre Dame previously. So that's a task. I asked him about identifying talent in the return game. And he said, yo, I'm sitting with guys 2023, 2024 class with position coaches saying he has value. He has value. This is the guy. He's putting in the work. He knows the tasks that he has. And he was very transparent to everybody, letting everybody know what was and where Notre Dame needs to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, you tell me if this is weird. When he said, I typically need 7 to 8 guys between kickers, punters, and long snappers to have an effective special team squad. And I said, wow, that number seems kind of big.
They're not all going to be scholarship guys. Right.
Yeah. But he said, yo, for competition, for true competition in special teams, I need 7 to 8 guys just between those 3 positions.
That's what I love about what they did this offseason. I mean, they added legitimate, and like they added Harvard's punter, who's like a 4-year punter at Harvard, good player.
Yeah.
They got him to come as a walk-on. I mean, that's huge. Yeah. I mean, like you get a legitimate punting candidate, because here's the problem that Notre Dame faces when it comes to walk-ons. Most teams fill that 6, 7, 8 guys. Cincinnati, for example, you can have 7 or 8 guys like that because you can find in-state kids that can come pay, $10,000 a year to go to school there. Yeah. Well, I don't care if you live a half a mile from Notre Dame or you live in a different, time zone, costs the same amount of money to go to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to get in. Notre Dame can't make exceptions. Like preferred walk-on has nothing to do with admissions. It just has to do with when they show up and, they're already on the team. They don't have to make the team. But admissions, Notre Dame could do, the football staff could do nothing to get preferred walk-ons into school. You've got to be able to get into Notre Dame and afford to go to Notre Dame. It's a lot harder to do. And they were able to do that this offseason, and they went out and got and I love too that they're not taking for granted that, younger guys are just going to emerge. Look, Blake Grupe being here now from Arkansas State doesn't guarantee that Josh Bryant's not going to be the kicker. It just means it guarantees that there's going to be competition.
Yes.
And, I feel good about it, but here's the thing I'm going to push back on Coach Mason a little bit, and I understand why he feels this way. Based on where he came from, I understand completely him saying we need to get more starters. Where I would like it to be is that you treat starting special teams jobs. This is what Bama does, in my opinion, and we're referencing Bama because in some ways, like I don't think Notre Dame needs to replicate Bama in a lot of ways. It's just more about overall big picture. But here is one area that I've always felt I liked about Bama. They'll have starters on special teams, but that's where they get a lot of their young guys involved, like that are really talented. And they treat it as like if you're a starter on kickoff team, it's like you're starting at middle linebacker. Like this is a very important job. And it was that mentality that permeates through the whole. Brian Kelly never made special teams a priority. So when you were starting on special teams, you're like, man, I got to run down on kickoff. Now, some kids didn't feel that way, but some guys, you have your Bo Bowers and guys like that took pride in it, but you've got to really, it's like, this is a starting role. This isn't, and I think that's where if a starter is clearly the best guy for a job, you play him there.
Yeah.
But it's also where like, hey, look, Josh Burnham's not quite ready yet to be a starting linebacker for us because he's kind of raw. But this kid is 6'4", big, and flipping athletic. He can be a starter for me on special teams and take pride in that.
Yeah.
And now you're getting in front of 80,000 people and you've got an important task. You're actually, because, hey, look, let's just say Notre Dame makes it to the national championship game next year. The starters on kickoff team are going to be on the field and kick return team are going to get on the field before the offense and defense do. The first chance you have to make a play in a football game is your special teams. And that's the mindset that you got to incorporate. So I think he's going to realize he's got a lot more depth at Notre Dame than he did at Cincinnati, which gives you an opportunity to say, hey, look, I don't need to run Maris Luafau down on 25 special teams plays. We're going to get him on what he does. So, like, let's say Maris is great on the punt cover team.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we're going to get him on the punt cover team, but I'm going to get Josh Burnham or Jalen Sneed or whatever on my punt team and my kickoff team and my kick return team or something like that, right? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where I'd like to see him do it, but the mindset is the right one, which is this isn't a punishment. This isn't like this is a hey, you're the guy. Like we need you. You're going to help us win football games. And if it's a starter, it's a starter. And you look at it as like, like that Latimer, starting D line, place at the table. I want guys feeling like that on the kicker. I'm on 4 starting team. I'm on 4 units on special. I'm a starter on 4 units. That's something to take pride in. And that's what they do at Bama. I mean, that's how one of the reasons they keep some of those younger kids happy because they're playing every game. They're invested every game.
Every game. That's when you see guys like you know why you heard Jalen Waddle's name before he became a star receiver? Because he was the gunner on the punt team, making tackles. And that's what you want from your big time guys that are coming in, big time recruits. Yeah, they're on the field, but they're invested in every part of the game. It's just not about going out making a touchdown catch. It's about winning the game, doing whatever you can to help your team and your program win a football game on that particular day. And like I said, special teams for places like Alabama is the doorway. It's like, hey, this is how you prove yourself in this program. Don't get caught up in coming out here, getting an interception. No. Prove it right here in camp. And then when you get into specific drills, we'll see what you can do in those other positions.
I think the reason I went with Brian Mason here is because I feel like without Washington, without Golden, with Dean McCullough, with Jared Parker, none of them are involved in culture changes, mindset changes.
No,
it's technical improvement. Maybe some nuance. They're all they're all replacing good coaches.
Yeah,
and hopefully they can be even better. But you and I have never said, gee, Lance Taylor did a bad job coaching, or John McNulty, or Mike Elson. And, of course, Al Golden's replacing Marcus Freeman.
Think about this. Have we had – think back, because I might miss someone. Have we had a punter or kicker that you just flat out felt like he's bad?
Like bad?
Like, yeah, he's
like
bad.
Terrible?
Like, we've watched Alabama have some awful place kickers. I mean, awful.
That's because they don't put those kids on scholarship more often than not.
Yeah.
I would say Jonathan Dorr went through a stretch in 2020. Was it 2020?
That was his sophomore year after he got the job?
No,
it was his?
It would have been – here, let me go find this, because there was a stretch for Jonathan Dorr last year, 2020. Okay. There was a stretch where he basically missed a kick every game. And it's like he went through 6 straight games where he missed a kick. Down the stretch of the season, in the final 5 games last year, Jonathan Dorr went 4 of 9 on field goal attempts.
Yeah.
But for an entire season, no, I don't. I mean, because Justin Yoon was about as money as it comes.
He was. Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's like when Justin Yoon lined up to kick, you're like, well, this is going to be good. That's just kind of how you felt. Kyle Brinza was inconsistent, but still pretty good. I think Kyle's last year, he went through a little bit of the same thing that Jonathan Dorr did, where he was really inconsistent.
Yeah.
With his field goals, and but they've had some talented kickers that have gone through mental things.
Yeah, we haven't really had,
but not a bad kicker.
Yeah, we haven't had really bad kicking,
which Cincinnati had this year.
Yes,
Cincinnati had a bad place.
They struggled. Yes.
Yeah.
So, like you said, I think he walks into a place. Most of these coaches, can we agree, walk in? Maybe Al Washington is debatable. The talent they're walking into, because I know the narrative surrounding Notre Dame is that there isn't a lot of talent at Notre Dame. Somehow the national media likes to say that, you can't get talent to Notre Dame, We know otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
We know there's plenty of talent in the defensive line room.
Mm-hmm.
We know there's plenty of talent in the tight end room, talent in the running back room, and there's plenty of talent on this roster to put a top 40 special teams unit on the football field. I don't think that's asking too much.
To say that again, to do
To
what?
put a top 40 special teams unit on the football field. And that's a low bar.
Well, they were already there.
That's
I mean,
what I'm saying.
they've been top 40.
Right. So now you want to elevate that to, he said he wants to be number one.
Right.
That's what Brian Mason is saying.
Right.
The expectation now is top 10.
Right.
Can we get to top 10?
Well, Cincinnati was 12 last year, and that was 12 with a horrible place kicker.
Yes.
If the place kicker was just situated, it wasn't just one, it was multiple. If the place kicking situation was just okay, they're a top 10 unit last year.
Yeah. What did they miss? They missed 2 field goals against Alabama?
They missed 2 against Notre Dame as well, I think. Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Let me look at Cincinnati's kicking. I mean, their kicking situation last year was a hot mess. And that's one of those ones I hardly ever put that on coaching. I mean, really, they went 9 of 19 last year. Their place kickers, 9 of 19 field goals. They even missed 2 extra points. The thing that I'll say is, and all these coaches are walking into situations where there's talent, and all these coaches, including Al Washington, are walking into situations where they're going to have more talent than anywhere they've ever been, top to bottom.
Yeah.
Now, Al Washington had Harold Landry and Zach Allen, right? But after those two, there was a bigger drop-off.
Yeah.
Obviously, Isaiah Foskey has a lot to prove to be what Harold Landry was in 2016, but
right.
I won't be shocked if Isaiah Foskey's drafted higher than Harold Landry was, because the talent, I think, is better. So all these guys are walking. I mean, the talent Al Washington had at Ohio State linebacker the last couple of years was not great. He had Baron Browning a couple of years ago. It was a third-round guy, but he was more of an athlete than a great football player. I think Al Washington got him to play like a better linebacker. But I mean, Tommy Eichenberg and Cody Simon this year, I mean, those aren't big-time players. No. They didn't have a Foskey or Nadamiole at linebacker the last 2 years. All these guys are walking into better rooms than what they've ever had.
Yeah.
And that includes Dylan McCullough being at USC. Now, obviously, we're talking college. I'm not
talking about the pros.
Right. I'm not talking about, they're better than the Kansas City Chief running backs. Right. We're talking about the college, right? The college rooms that they're walking into. They're all working in talented rooms. It's about maximizing that talent, putting the right pieces in place. I mean, a football team's a lot like my wife. One of the things I got her for Christmas was she loves doing puzzles. She'll sit here on her iPad and just do puzzles, all like, jigsaw puzzles all day. Mm-hmm. So I bought her some new puzzles, like to do like manually. And I bought this big board that you put on your table and you kind of keep your puzzles there. And it's got little drawers and all that. Anyway, But the point is like, I think about that, and I think that's what being a head coach is about. That's what being a position coach is about.
Yeah.
You've got this one beautiful puzzle, like this one complete puzzle that's beautiful and all that, but your job is to take the pieces and put them in the right spots.
Yeah.
And if you the great coaches can do that. Guys like Brian Kelly never quite get to that point because for all types of different reasons. So to me, with the one difference about Brian Mason compared to the guys behind him, and the reason I put Mason third, and the reason I'm going to put Harry and Chancey Stuckey ahead of them is for different reasons. But the one common theme among the top 3 guys on this board is all 3 of them, the one thing they have to do that the previous coaches didn't, meaning behind them on this list, there's an attitude correction that is needed. There isn't necessarily an attitude correction needed at running back and linebacker and D line and tight end from the standpoint of like, they're beyond the overall improvement that's needed from the team. There's a complete 180 that has to happen on special teams. There's a complete, and here's the thing. I think the players are going to, here's the other thing. The players are going to embrace Brian Mason. So, Sean, you know this. We've talked about this a lot. Former players that will tell you exactly what I'm about to tell you. Brian Polian was not a well-liked person by the players. Very few of them. Very few of them.
That's the guy that was
him.
over your recruiting too, you
Right,
know.
right. He wasn't respected. He wasn't liked by a lot of people. You listen to Brian Mason talk for about 30 seconds, and you're like, they're going to love this guy.
Yep.
Like, he is just a ball of energy, and it's real, you know? And the fact that he came with coach. So, like, I think the other thing is because the players respect Coach Freeman as much as they do, when a guy comes in that's sort of like his guy, I think there's going to be a level of acceptance, immediate acceptance of that guy because, well, Coach Freeman has coached this guy before. He knows what we want. He knows what works. You know, we trust him if he trusts Coach Mason because, remember, they've coached together at, was it 3 stops before?
Kent State. They started Kent State.
Right.
Went on to Purdue and then on to Cincinnati and now at Notre Dame. Yeah.
So 3 previous stops together.
Yeah.
So to me, I look at it and say, man, that's a situation where I think there's going to be that they're going to love his energy. They're going to love sort of his, just seems like a genuine guy. Everyone that I've talked to me when he first was the name, because remember for a while there, we were being told that it was going to be Marty Biaggi was going to be the guy to get the job.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Brian Mason's name kind of came up. And when I talk to people that knew him, they're like, kids love him. Like, he's a genuine guy. He's full of energy. Like, he builds great relationships. Like, it's that theme of all the coaches that Marcus Freeman hired. And that is going to be such a 180 from the dude that was there before, Brian Polian. And I think the kids are it's going to be like, you're going to look forward to getting into the room with him. You know, you're going to, man, I get to play for Coach Mason, right? Like, I think there's going to be a lot of that.
Yeah, the special Coach Mason and any special teams coach, the only way I can describe it is that if your coaching staff was your hand, the special teams coach is the thumb. Because it's the appendage that touches every other one. Right. Like, the special teams coach is in the defensive meetings, offensive meetings. He's talking to the head coach. That's why you see guys that were over special teams become great head coaches, especially in the NFL, because they're part of everything that goes on in that building. And he is, the first thing he said is, I've been going throughout the building to every position room, trying to convince guys how important special teams is. That was his first goal. I have to go around to every room and prove to these young men how important special teams is and how they need to be involved in it.
Right.
So,
but here's the thing, though, right? To help that, Sean.
Yeah.
The head coach just hired one of his boys.
Yeah.
You don't hire one of your friends if you're smart and give them some crap job that's not important. Right? Like, you want to show how important it is, go hire a guy like Brian Mason, you know, as your special teams coach. Someone that hey, look, I know this guy. This is how important special teams is for me. I went and got one of my guys, right? I mean, I think it sends a message. And, you know, I think he's going to, but to the point of the discussion is, it's going to be a hard task because you've got to change the culture. You've got to build trust at a position where a lot of players were naturally distrusting of the previous guy.
Yeah.
It's a mindset change. It's a culture change. It's an attitude change. It's a scheme change. Everything from before has to be different than it is, you know, now compared to what it was. And that's not what's happening at those other positions, right? They're hoping to make something better that was already pretty good. This is different. Yeah. And that's why you always look at when Notre Dame ranked high, they've ranked in the top 25 in some different special teams categories. One of the areas where they ranked really high was the coverage units were really good. Kickoff coverage and punt coverage were really good. And part of it was because the one thing Brian Polian was good at is I've always felt like his special teams were fundamentally sound. I will give him that. That is the one nice thing that Brian Mason's walking into is he's not walking into like all those other negative things we said, and they don't know how to play. Brian Polian did a pretty decent job of the drills and the technique and that kind of stuff. he just had he was just not a good scheme guy. The attitude wasn't right. He was too conservative. A lot of different things that I didn't like about it. Notre Dame would fake a punt against, a team when they're beating them by 30. Remember that a couple years ago with Tony Jones Jr., right? Like, why not do that, when you're down 6? You know what I mean? Because, whatever the case may be. But I think that is the one thing. It was a fundamentally sound unit. But the point is they had athletes. I mean, they had some good athletes on those coverage teams. Absolutely. I had a friend of mine who's a special teams coach, and he was like, man, I hate getting ready for Notre Dame special teams. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, because he would kind of make fun of some of the other things he's like, but I hate having to return against them. So why is that? He's like, they got a bunch of 230-pound linebackers who run 4.5s. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't have any. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's like,
absolutely.
And that's what it was. It wasn't the scheme. It was just, I know we physically can't block those dudes.
Yeah.
But when they played Ohio State and Clemson and teams like that, they had dudes that could physically block those dudes, and that's why they weren't as effective in those games.
Right.
But that's been true since before. I mean, that's not just a Brian Polian thing. That was true I remember the 2015 special teams was good during the regular season, and then they get the Fiesta Bowl against Ohio State, and they got embarrassed.
Yeah.
Remember, they were like pinning them inside the 10-yard line on kick returns. They were blocking a soul.
Yeah.
So this was happening before Brian Polian got here.
I think the last time I felt excitement in the return game was probably
C.J. Sanders.
13, 14. Yeah.
It'd been
Atkinson the second to C.J. Sanders.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
That little pocket right there.
Right.
Yeah.
And they've got too many good athletes not to be better on returns right now.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. It's like, if I let Chris Tyree, I'm so sick of watching Chris Tyree stand at the goal line with a ball land right over his head and land it like the one deep. And he's like,
right.
And that's not a knock on Chris Tyree. He's being told. He's being put. You put your heels on the goal line.
Yeah.
And if the ball's over your head, you don't field it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I hate that. Because it's like, imagine if they said that to Clinton Johnson, right?
Mike Miller back in the day.
Rocket, right? Rocket. So whatever. Last two, Sean. Last two. Number 2, I went with Harry Hiestand, number 2.
Yeah.
And the reason I went with Hiestand, number 2, compared to the guy that we're going to talk about next, is I think that Hiestand has a lot of responsibility. To me, there's a big gap between 1 and 2 and everybody else. And there's a lot of important tasks that Harry Hiestand is in front of him. He is someone that there's an attitude and a cultural change that has to happen in the offensive line room. This isn't a negative thing towards Jeff Quinn. And like Jeff Quinn was not disliked by his players. Like Jeff Quinn was a good guy that was respected by his players as a man. He just wasn't a very good O-line coach for this level. And part of the reason is he developed a very passive line. The 18 line, for the most part, was that way. The 19 and 21 lines were definitely that way.
Mm-hmm.
The one exception was 18 to a degree, because you had a bunch of Harry Hiestand leftovers, holdovers, Bars, Mustipher, Hainsey, Kramer. Then 20 is the year we've talked about with you had Hiestand working with those guys in the offseason. You had Chris Watt, right? Yeah. It was the exceptions. 19 and 21 were at times embarrassing with how passive they were.
Yeah.
That was the thing. It's like, that Tommy Rees doesn't want to be that way. Tommy Rees wants to run the football, but you can't run the football when you have, guys that just you're taught not to come off. I mean, we've shown this time and time again. You step and you catch instead of driving. Yeah. That's the first thing Harry Hiestand is going to change. But it's not just a technical thing. It's a mindset thing. It's a cultural thing. Like Notre Dame has to have offensive linemen that view themselves as the baddest dudes on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not afraid of you. I don't care who you are, bring it, right? You want some, come get some.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the kind of team that can steal an opponent's soul. And we saw that several times during Notre Dame's tenure where, I think of Stanford 2015, I think of USC 2017, where that team was just like, I don't want any more of this, man. These dudes are, it's like, do you got like a white towel I can throw in or something? I've taken too many body blows today. And that's a mindset thing as much as it's a talent thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that was missing, especially this year, because what we said was this is going to be the first year, 2021, that the majority of the starting lineup is made up of Jeff Quinn recruits or guys only Jeff Quinn has coached.
Yeah.
Whereas in 2020, 4 of the starters were coached by Harry Hiestand for at least a season and were recruited by Harry Hiestand. And so there's a completely different mindset. So that's the biggest thing is he's got to change the mindset, the culture, the attitude of this group. And then he's got to deprogram. And this is where for him and Coach Stuckey, it's the hardest thing. And that's why, to me, Mason doesn't belong ahead of these two guys. And I know because I understood where you were coming from, but
Yeah.
the one thing he inherited was a group of special teams guys that are so fundamentally sound.
Yeah.
Right? He's got to do all those other things, but Harry does not inherit a group that's fundamentally sound.
No.
It's the opposite.
Yeah.
And
Mace has a standout. Let's be honest. Bo Bauer is a special teams standout.
Well, I mean, Jordan Patelho, when he's head is on straight, is one. He's got a kick returner that's as fast as any team in the country's kick returner.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you're right. And I think we could have some, I mean, and he's got some talent. Now, Harry Hiestand is going to, here's the thing about Harry. He isn't, this is why I'm excited. You want to know, everybody wants to know why, you know, I'm like so excited about 2022. It's Harry Hiestand's walking into a completely different situation than he walked in 2012. It was Zach Martin to Chris Watt, and then Christian Lombard, and then like, you know what I mean? Like, he's walking in a situation now where it's like, your third tackle is a guy that if you coach him right could be a first-round pick someday, Tosh Baker. He's probably never going to get that chance in Notre Dame.
Yep.
You know, you're talking about Jarrett Patterson this year could arguably be their third most physically gifted offensive lineman this year.
No, I think he is.
And you're talking about a lineup where there's guys that would start for past Harry Hiestand lines in like 12 and 13 and 14 that aren't going to see the field this year. And the talent is there. It's going to be a younger group. 10 of your scholarship linemen are going to be freshmen or sophomores, but it's a really talented group. It's a young group, but very talented group. And so the talent's there. It's just now Coach Hiestand has to get all the other stuff out of it. But that's going to be a little challenging.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you have a group that's not that talented, it can be easier to change that because they know they've got to buy into that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and they know they've got to, hey, I've got to be technically sound and fundamentally sound and all that kind of stuff. And so he's walking into a situation where he's going to have to do a lot of deprogramming before he can program things correctly.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, you buy a new computer, you take a friend's computer and you got to wipe all that stuff that they had on there out first before you start putting your stuff on there. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what Harry Hiestand is going to have to go through. It's you and say it's a little, this is the one thing I think you could argue he should be number one is that it's even more so than what Stuckey has to go through is the deprogram. Because I don't think Dale programmed anything. Like technically there was no programming.
Well,
like,
I think the gap between Stuck and Hiestand is probably the biggest gap on the list, in my opinion. Just from what you pointed out, I think you wrote an article about it and you discussed it on previous shows. What they have as far as depth going into spring ball because of the lack of recruiting in previous classes is a problem for Stuck coming in. Like, okay, develop these guys, but how hard can you go? Because you don't want to lose guys in spring ball. You want to allow your freshmen to come into fall camp and then make an impact. And then you don't, heck, you really can't. Who can you lose? Like, that's a tough situation. Harry Hiestand, like you said, Jeff Quinn, issues with, you know, the way he did teach fundamentals. You would see guys initially make a block and then just lose all base and just give up sacks. You watch that Cincinnati game.
It's not a talent problem.
It's like, did you just stop blocking? Like, did you just decide to stop blocking? It's like, man, you had contact. And then it's almost like you just said, okay,
it was bad.
That's enough. It was really bad. So, like you said, the talent along the offensive line.
Now,
let me ask you a question.
Let me just say one thing real quick. My point was simply that if you were going to make a case for Hiestand being number one, it would be this right here. He has way more deprogramming he has to do than Chancey. That's the one difference. My point being, and we'll get to more of this
As
when we talk
far
about
as
Chancey.
tearing down and building
Yes,
back
because
up.
Dell
Okay.
didn't teach anything.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
that's the thing, is like Dell taught like rudimentary stuff.
So he has a blank canvas.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, that right. So where Jeff Quinn taught a lot, but it was a lot of stuff that's not right.
Yeah.
And you've got to deprogram that. You've got to change their muscle memory completely. Right. And that's a challenge, but that's the only one.
Yeah.
And I think that's one that can be fixed in one off season.
Yeah.
You know, but
and didn't you say his relationship with Blake Fisher was probably one of the most intriguing things to watch?
Very. And it's not, a lot of people took that as me saying like, oh, is Blake soft or not? No, I'm not. It's Blake came to Notre Dame to play for someone other than Harry Heastand.
Yeah.
With a different personality than Harry Heastand.
Yeah.
He's your star.
Yeah.
He is your best player. I mean, he is the guy that if he is dominant, you're going to have a chance to be a dominant line. He can be your Quentin Nelson, your Zach Marr. I mean, look, Jarrett Patterson's a really good football player. Don't get me wrong, but Jarrett Patterson is more, he's the Mike McGlinchey to the Quentin Nelson, right? I mean, good player, but there's no doubt that Q was that dude, right? Yeah. And so to me, if the relationship isn't there, it's harder to get the most out of a player.
Yeah.
And your point about Steve Elmer is, you told us about Steve Elmer.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to bet you that I would be willing to bet, I don't know this, correct me if I'm wrong, that Steve would be willing to admit that maybe he didn't get the most out of his ability because he didn't embrace that coaching.
Yeah.
Right now it's paid off for him as a man, which is awesome. And that's more important than it paying off for him as a guard.
Like you probably wouldn't want to pair Steve Elmer with an incoming recruit.
Right.
When he was playing.
Back then.
But now?
You would.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the interesting, when you talk about Blake Fisher, this is something, a guy like Harry Heastand, and everybody comes from different situations and different backgrounds. But Blake Fisher, you saw, if you followed him over the Christmas break on the vacation, you saw how close he is with his parents. And for me, it just looks like he would be the type of kid, if he did call home and say, hey, man, this dude is really riding me. Mm-hmm. His dad would probably respond like my dad did when I came home and I said, yo, I didn't do anything wrong. And I have to keep running gassers at the end of practice with everybody else. And my dad would look at me and say, did you come in first in the gassers? And I said, no. Then there's something wrong with you.
Right.
Like, because that gasser is for everybody. Like, if it exposes the mentality. Because if you're not about the team, you're going to complain about something that everybody's been asked to do. I think his dad would tell him, son, look, you're there for a reason. Learn. Stop complaining and learn and go do your job. And that's when parenting comes into place.
Yeah.
Man, because so many kids.
Sean, parents you have to have allies at home.
Yes.
That's why one of the smartest things Tommy Rees did during the open recruiting session is he spent a day going to see Logan Diggs' mom, not a high school recruit. He went and saw Logan Diggs' mom because he couldn't go see her during recruiting because of COVID. Because when your kid's thinking about, I'm homesick, I'm this, I'm that, and if your parents don't have the back of the coaches, those kids leave. And that's just a fact. The thing that surprised me the most about Blake when he showed up, and we've talked about this before, I was shocked when I heard from so many people about how hard he worked. Just and not that I thought he was a lazy, because I mean I watched him at a camp and he worked his butt off, so it's not that, but it's when you're that big and that much better than everyone else around you, do you really know what it takes to work at the level needed to dominate?
He wants to be great.
Because 70% of what you do can dominate in high school.
Yeah.
The fact that he worked as hard as he did when he first, I mean, and this is the thing, that there was a lot of players and former players that had the same skepticism I had. And they meet Blake. He's not your typical lineman.
No.
He's very personable, very outgoing. He's a social media creature. He's the complete opposite of like Charles Jagusah, right? Which you've talked about. Like Charles is like the typical lineman.
Yeah.
Blake is not your typical lineman. And there's a lot of people like, does this kid care more about, social media and all that than he does football? That was a legitimate concern that some of his teammates and former Notre Dame linemen had about him, just from not knowing him, just from the recruit. But everyone to a man in January when he enrolled was like, yep, I don't have those concerns anymore because this dude is a dude and he works hard. I don't think that happens if mom and dad aren't pushing him at home.
That's my point.
And I'm supporting your point. Yeah.
Yeah, you can
So,
tell. You can just tell.
Yeah.
So if that phone call goes back home, I don't see his parents, all of a sudden rubbing his back, and all of a sudden, like you said, they're allies.
I don't think it was a given he was going to come to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just because of offensive line. It was because the degree aspect. Sean, a lot of kids from Avon, Indiana aren't beating down the door to, gee, I want to go to Notre Dame and have the hardest. That comes from home.
Yeah.
I mean, but at the same, all that's fine. But at the end of the day, sometimes a great kid and a great coach don't mesh.
Don't match. Yeah.
Harry Heastand and Liam Eichenberg's another one. Liam did not like Coach Heastand when Coach Heastand was here. Then he realized, oh, yeah. And that's when Liam sought Coach Heastand out later.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the point. Good kids, hardworking kids didn't mess with Coach Heastand. Yeah. And that's true of every coach. This isn't unique to Harry Heastand. Every coach isn't going to connect with everybody.
Yeah.
Right. And so to me, you have to connect with your young stud.
Yeah.
You have to. Because if Blake buys in and Jarrett buys in, everybody's going to buy in.
Everybody's going to buy in.
And that's where I'm coming from. It's not about, oh, Blake's soft or he doesn't want to. I'm not worried about Blake not reacting well to being yelled at. I'm worried about the relationship that goes into the yelling, meaning if Harry Heastand yells at Robert Hainsey the same way he yelled at Steve Elmer, those are being taken two completely different ways.
Yeah.
Because of the relationship, like the trust that is there. Steve didn't trust Coach Heastand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at times Coach Heastand didn't necessarily maybe care enough about that. Because it can be hard when you have 15 dudes in a room. That's another challenge of being an offensive line coach or defensive line coach compared to a quarterback's coach.
Especially
like 4 dudes.
When the majority of those guys fall in line and you just have this one is like, are you just bucking on purpose?
Right.
Like, what's wrong?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I talk about it's the importance of it. It's not about soft or Blake doesn't be yelled at, because Jeff Quinn wasn't exactly like walking up, giving hugs and singing Kumbaya. Like that wasn't. That's when I say they're different coaching styles. That's not it. It wasn't like when Blake Fisher gave up a sack in practice. He walked up and said, it's going to be okay, big fella. I still love you. That's not what was happening, right? So, but that's important, and getting that group is important. But I'll say something, Sean, and you and I haven't talked about this yet because I wanted to purposely not bring it up because I wanted to get your immediate reaction.
Yeah.
Is it me or did Harry Heastand look younger than he looked when he left Notre Dame?
I'm glad you pointed that out.
He looked so much more refreshed and energized and excited than I've ever seen him when he was at Notre Dame.
I told you the story as soon as I walked in the room, the first person I came in contact with.
Right.
In the breakout session.
Yeah. That was so fun.
We walk over from the media room. And jokingly, Malik was like, he probably felt like you were a recruit.
Yeah.
When he saw you. But, I walk into the room, I turn the corner, first person I lock eyes with is Harry Heastand. He pops me right in the chest. What's up, guy?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's up? Hey, coach, how you doing? Yeah. And he stands there, and when he finally stands behind the table, he gets to talking. Brian, there's a rejuvenation in him.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you. He's been rejuvenated because you pointed this out, and you can speak on it better than I can. There's a lot more freedom for him to be able to be himself amongst this coaching staff than maybe amongst the other coaching staff. And he has an obvious chip on his shoulder to prove. Let's not forget, he's coming off being the scapegoat for the Chicago Bears.
I love that you said it I love that you said he didn't get fired, but I love how you said
he was scapegoated by Matt Nagy and the Chicago Bears. Absolutely. Everybody knows it.
Right.
Everybody knows it.
Right.
He was scapegoated by the Bears. Nobody touches him. And then all of a sudden, he's right back where he left.
Right. Nobody touches him, I think, because he wasn't wanting to be touched.
That's part of the reason.
And that's another thing too, Sean.
He has a chip right there to prove that I'm still look, I'm still Harry Heastan. Don't get it twisted. Like, I'm still that guy.
I also think the family aspect is a big part of this too.
Mm-hmm.
I do, because when Harry here was here last time, his daughter was in middle school
Yeah,
and just getting to high school, like, and I think that he talked about this, like being able to be 100% invested in her and her sports. And she's the last one. Now all the kids are out of the house.
yeah.
And I think that has factored into it as well, to be completely honest with you. I think that's a part of, to me, what has given him sort of a second wind,
Gotcha,
in my opinion.
gotcha.
It's the combination of what you just said,
Yeah,
and also there's three parts to it. The family is, I mean, you could just see like how he felt so blessed that he was able to experience something a lot of coaches can't,
right.
which is I got to live through my child in her last year. Now she's gone, and it's just me and my wife.
Yeah,
And I think it was a situation where I think that played a role too. His boys are now kind of off. His one son coaches in the NFL. He's got another one that's, I think, in college or
in
getting ready to get
college,
out of
I believe.
college. And now his daughter's going to college, and he was
Yeah,
able to watch her play soccer and all these other things. And I think that factor too. But he looked so much more just like,
he might end up being a better version of himself.
yeah. I don't know if
Right?
that's going to be true or not, but like he just had a different, just a glow, just everything. I'm
Right.
watching the videos, and I'm listening to the stuff you sent me about him,
Yeah.
and I'm like, this is not the dude.
This is
Like
not the
the
same guy. Yeah,
crescendo is still there, which I
yeah,
love.
yeah,
Look, we're gonna we're gonna work hard,
yeah.
and then we're gonna have to work on doing our bass, like the
Yeah.
crescendo at the end. I love that. It's just like my favorite quirk of any coach.
He talked about 6 to 7 minutes about how important Matt Balis is to his offense.
That was my third one.
And I
I
was
think
like,
that's my third thing.
and like in depth.
Yes. People don't understand how much was work that Harry had to overcome other sins when he was here for all except the last year,
Yeah.
and still put some really good lines on the field
Hmm.
but it's not just talent. That last line was so much better than the others. It's not just talent, because let's be honest, Quentin Nelson and Zach Martin aren't way different players.
Right.
Quentin Nelson and Ronnie Stanley aren't way different players. He had Stanley, he had Zach Martin. The talent was good, but that having Matt Balis, I mean, and you could just see his eyes light up when he was
When he
asked about
started
Matt
talking
Balis.
about him. Absolutely.
I mean, so I feel like before, and I'm just going to be honest, this is people. Harry Heastand knew exactly what the deficiencies were at Notre Dame his last stint.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason he left. Part of it, not all of it, but part of it. I don't think he liked the boss. And I don't think he liked. I do now. He did get along with Chip Long very well, and he got along with Mike Denbrock really well. So, like his coordinators, he got along well with.
Yeah.
But there was issues with the strength program. I've talked to kids that were like, they would close the gym up, and we had guys that were getting memberships at a local gym so they could go get a workout in at night. And just it was a bad situation. It was a really bad situation for Notre Dame. And so when I look at Harry Heastand coming back this time, I think it's a situation where he sees the parts around him are so much better now.
Hmm.
The strength program, the fact that the coordinator, someone that he knows as well as he knows Tommy. I mean, again, Harry Heastand was Tommy's O-line coach his last 2 years. They coached together in 2017. This isn't like some new relationship. This is there's a
Tommy said he talked to him once or twice
right.
a month,
Yeah. Yeah.
continually, even after he left.
Yeah.
So
And so I feel like, man, I was shocked at how fired up he looked.
yeah,
And when he started talking about recruiting, you could see it was like, no, don't worry, I got that. Like, don't worry
yeah,
about that. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like, and then Marcus Freeman relayed that story. He's like, no, I get this, I get that. Like, don't. And I think because Marcus was hearing all these stories about, and it was a lot of it was just nonsense. I mean, if I know I can pick 5 guys and land 4 of them, and I only need 4, why do I need to recruit 20 guys?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Just to say what you said, little tidbit. We know Luke Montgomery committed to Ohio State,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
I talked to his coach, Stephon Adams, after the commitment. And I said, Coach, let me ask you something. If Harry Heastan had been in Notre Dame the entire time, is he committing today? And Coach said no.
Yeah.
Flat out.
Yeah.
No. He said, but it was too late.
Right.
It was just too late.
And I don't think Harry Heastan was as interested in Luke Montgomery's other guys.
Well, when you got Jagasaw and Caden Proctor on the board,
he just doesn't fit the normal body. He's a thinner kid, like
he's had to grow into his body,
right?
Instead of having like that.
Harry didn't push for him the way he pushed for other guys. I think that was a mutual
parting of the ways.
Yeah. And Notre Dame never really truly recruited him as an offensive. They said, "Hey, we will recruit you as an offensive lineman if that's what you want to do." But they were never bought into the whole "you're an offensive lineman" thing.
Yeah.
And so, but to your point, like if Harry was here and Harry wanted him, you're correct. And we're gonna see how that plays out with Freeling and Okunlola and Jagasaw and those kind of guys. It's gonna be interesting. But but the task in front of him is still a challenge. He still has a lot. He's not going to just walk in a room and like wave a magic wand and the offensive line is going to be elite next year. I mean, he's going to have to put a lot of work in. And
how patient are you going to be honestly?
3 games.
3 games.
3 games.
3 games. And it's not because they've proven past pro that they're pretty. We talked about this. You remember we had this conversation? Honestly, I'm not looking at Joe Alt. I'm not looking at Blake. I think we both were underwhelmed by what Jared Patterson put on tape.
Yeah.
I want to compare Jared Patterson's tape from this year to the previous year at the end of the year.
But see, this is why I said it's more about the guards. I feel Jared Patterson's issues were, one, not being coached properly, but more so, he was so worried about what was happening at guard.
You can say 62.
Not just 62. I mean, the left guard at times is worse than 62 was last year at times, which is saying a lot.
That is saying a lot.
But I think if you watch Jared Patterson play, his best games came down the stretch when they put Andrew Kristofic at guard.
At guard, yes.
Because Andrew wasn't dominant, but Andrew was steady.
Mm-hmm.
And so then he just had to kind of worry about the right guard. And then you saw him getting up to the second level more. And those type of things. So I feel like that's why I said the guard play is the most important part of it when we look at just how they play. I'm not worried about Blake Fisher. I'm worried about the relationship with Blake Fisher, meaning Blake Fisher's going to be good, but can you get him to be his best? That's the key. Because Blake Fisher not buying into Harry Heastan is still a really good player. Blake Fisher buying into Harry Heastan is like, that's the best tackle Notre Dame has had in 30 years.
Monster. How important is on the task that is set before Harry Heastan, where would you put in the priority figuring out the ordering of the 5?
Not high right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be much more important in the summer and going into fall camp. I think the importance right now is the culture, the mindset, the attitude, the demeanor. I think, you're going to want to learn guys right away. He's going to want to see all 15 practices to kind of really figure out, okay, can this kid play? Can that kid play? Where can all these kids perform? Should I put Blake at left tackle, right tackle, guard? You know what I mean? Like all those different things have to be determined. But I think the most important task right now is building the foundation, rebuilding. Because this isn't just like, we love using analogies here, right?
Right.
This isn't like you bought some land and there's nothing on it and you got to build the house up. No, you bought some land and there's a condemned house on it and you got to tear it down, then build it back up.
Yeah.
That's a little bit more of a task, right? Because you got to tear it down, clear it out. And, what parts can you use? What parts can you keep? Hey, this is strong, but let's get rid of that. And in this case, I think everything's got to go. But what I'll say is like the foundation's got to go. But I'll say this, like there's some talent to work with. Like, you've got this house and you got to tear it down because it wasn't put together properly.
Right.
But you're keeping all the beams, you're keeping all these different, right? Because these are good parts.
Yeah.
It's just you didn't put it together correctly.
Yeah.
So we're going to tear it down, put the right parts where they need to be, and then rebuild the house.
Yeah.
As opposed to tearing it down and throwing all that junk away And because you know I got to re-recruit better players, and
Yeah.
again, these guys are walking into an 11-2 team,
Yeah.
right? The that's the it's like for all the problems we talk about the offensive line, this is still a team that went 11-2 last
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. And it's so,
So
he
that's
talked about Matt Balis, just
yeah.
to go to your point. Matt Balis is helping him tear down some of that stuff.
Yes.
Because he talked about it. Like, that's what
Yeah.
I teach. I
Yeah.
see how they're using that to lift
Yeah.
and what they're using in their base. That's what we teach. They're learning it now.
It's also here and
Yeah.
here
Yeah.
that is also part of the Matt Balis experience. I mean,
Mhm.
Troy Pride tweeted something out the other day,
The other day.
and he was
About
like,
his rehab. Yeah.
"Yeah,
And how
I'm getting through this rehab because
of Matt Balis.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, why say that? Why does Troy need to say that? There's no reason for him to say that other than just that's the truth,
That's the truth.
right? Like, is he just like randomly? Matt Balis calls him, say, "Can you say something nice about me?" No, that I can assure you that didn't happen.
Yeah.
It's just because that's the truth. And you could just see the energy with, I mean, that was the thing that caught me, Sean, is like, that was my one question mark is, does he still have that fire?
Yeah.
And I'm like, he looked younger. He looked more refreshed.
Yeah.
He looked excited. Harry's never liked talking to the media. Like most coaches don't like, because he even says, like, look, I'm not trying to be a coordinator. I'm not trying to be I just want to coach the line, And now here's the thing. He doesn't have to go home, and he's got 3 kids at the house that he's got to go home and be dad. And like he's dad, he's still dad.
Yeah.
But you did your job. You raised it's like Sean, like you and I talk about you still talk to your daughter all the time.
Yeah.
But she's still a grown woman now she's got to live her own life and make her own decisions. It's your role as a dad is different now that she's off to college.
That's right.
Than it was when you came home and she was right there and you're still building her up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a thing where it's like, okay, you can do things now professionally that you couldn't do when your daughter was still in high school.
Right.
And that's where I feel like Coach Eastand is at. He did his job raising his children. And now it's like, hey, you got to go do what you got to do. And now it's like, okay, I can, because it was funny. There was a comedy made about, about his wife saying like, you're still putting in all the work. And he's like, I'm not putting on. She's like, yeah, you are. Because he didn't realize it. Because that's just who he is. He's like watching line play and all. That's what like he was retired, but he wasn't retired. It's like, they're trying to explain this to people. Like he was still involved in O-line stuff. I just don't think he thought he wanted to coach anymore.
Yeah.
And I think when his daughter left and then when Kelly left, it's like, okay.
I think I missed this thing.
Because, I mean, I've said this on the show. There was no way Harry Easton was coming back to Notre Dame. And then the minute Brian Kelly left, that everything I started to hear from my sources was 180. Like, to the point where he reached out to Notre Dame. Like, Tommy was interested, but, like, before Tommy even had a chance – because remember, for a while there, Tommy was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Right? But Harry had already said, hey, I'd like to come back. You know what I mean? So, yeah, but here's a good question. We're going to get into some questions here. Would Harry have recruited Joe Alt? Yes.
Yes.
Harry loved guys that had a DNA.
Pedigree. Right? I was just about to say pedigree.
Yeah. The Martins.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. There was another guy. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank. I mean, he didn't recruit the goal leg. Why am I drawing a blank on this? There was another player that he recruited. Oh, Alex Bars. His dad played at Notre Dame, was a linebacker. I mean, Joe Alt was a kid that Harry would have brought him on campus, had Matt Balis check him out, because those type of kids were always a Matt Balis decision. And if you're smart as a coach, that's a good thing where, you let like, hey, can that kid get up 300 and move? Yeah. No, coach. I can get that kid to 300 pounds, but he's gonna lose about a little bit. Yeah. He's gonna get tight and or hey, I'm gonna get this kid up to this kid may be 300 pounds by the time he shows up. He's got a great frame. Those are always the converse. Like that, I'm told that Balis was much more Joe Alt frame plus Emil Wagner frame, not so quite as sure. Yeah, it's gonna be a little bit more. I think we can, but it's a little bit more shaky. I think it would have taken a Joe Alt, no question about it. And he took guys like that in the past. I mean, he wasn't just let's go get top 50 recruits. I mean, he took some guys like that in the
Yeah.
past, and some of them panned out. I mean, Aaron Banks was kind of like that. Aaron was for opposite reasons. Aaron was a big raw kid. It was 350, 60 pounds at one point in time. I mean, he was a big boy. So he had no problem taking those kind of project kids if they had the upside. And he obviously Joe Alt had the upside. So I'm excited about it. So before we go, Sean,
number one,
huh? Oh God, well I thought we kind of are a Chancey. Yeah, you're right. I'm like Harry Heastan, O-line. See, we're done. Number one on the list, and I think it's clear.
Yeah,
is Chancey Stuckey.
Yes,
and I'll turn it over to you, Sean, to kind of kick off your reasons because we're pretty much on the same page on this one.
And you can go right now. Irish Breakdown wrote an article that was released today talking about the vision that Chancey Stuckey has for the wide receiver room this year and moving forward. And I want to talk about the mentality, the two-step mentality that he said he's already established with his wide receivers. The first thing he said is the standard is the standard.
Mm-hmm.
And you are that standard. Mm-hmm. That's what's so tough about having a standard. You're the standard. And it's a challenge for you to improve every day. And secondly, we don't have a Raising Cane's fast food mentality when we come into this building and step between the white lines. We have a white linen tablecloth mentality. That means when you go to a 5-star restaurant, you behave differently.
Mm-hmm.
You're more.
He used Raising Cane's compared to Ruth's Chris.
Yes, he did.
Right.
Those are the two restaurants he used. He said you're more locked in, and he said that's the focus our wide receivers are going to have. They're going to be locked in. They're going to be all about business, and they're going to learn how to play this position, and they're going to be super competitive. That's what he wants. And then he relayed to us that his perfect wide receiver room, he wants it to look like a basketball team. And it's something when we shared it, we were talking in the parking lot of Panera about this on Wednesday. And it got me excited because immediately he started to explain from a footwork standpoint how much really football has become about basketball. And that's why he loves athletes at the wide receiver position that also play basketball because they coincide.
Yep.
And with that, immediately, the one person he spoke about immediately, because he went through, I need my point guard, I need my 2, my 3, my 4, and my 5. The one name he uttered, it wasn't Lorenzo Styles Jr., it wasn't Avery Davis. The one name he uttered was Deion Colzie.
Right.
He said, I've seen him play. Mm-hmm. I know what he has. He's going to be my 4 guy.
Right, because Deion was a really good high school basketball player.
Absolutely.
And I don't think it has anything to do with them both being from Georgia. I'm sure that's just a coincidence.
No, probably not. But he has experience.
I'm being sarcastic. Yeah. Meaning being from Georgia, he's going to be more familiar with what Deion did in high school.
That immediately made me say, yo, all right. Because I really wasn't expecting, I want Deion Colzie to get better. Mm-hmm. But for the coach to identify, like, man, watch this guy.
Right.
He's going to be one of my playmakers.
So
that says a lot. Like he's identifying and being able to put the guys in their right spots already. But they're all going to be competitive, super competitive, and they will be fundamentally strong because of the two things we said at the beginning. The focus that he set before all of them, that he's gotten all of them to buy into. And he said that they've all bought into it.
Yeah.
And I'm happy.
Look, Sean, the receivers are going to be the test case for you and I's theory of, do great players ultimately want to be coached and coached hard?
Mm-hmm.
And that is what I believe to be true about this room.
Mm-hmm.
I believe these kids want to be coached. They want to be pushed. They want to be challenged. They know that they need that to get to their maximum. But I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I think there was one player in the room last year that kind of liked the way that it was because it worked for him.
Yeah.
But he's not here anymore.
No.
I think the kids that are back know that they weren't good enough from a technical standpoint. I'm confident that they know that. Yeah. I'll just leave it at that. I'm confident that they realized they weren't given the tools to be successful. And so I think that they're going to be looking for Coach Stuckey to do that. So I think it's like they're willing learners. Like they want to learn. Whereas like you look at the D line and the running backs, it's like, hey, we've been pretty good.
Yeah.
Tight ends, we've been pretty good. Like, why are you changing what worked for us? The receivers are like, starving and they just want to be fed. They want to be fed knowledge. They want to be pushed and told, no, you're better than this. Not have a coach that talks about how my talent's not good enough, and we don't have a stars,
That's
No, they want a
crazy.
coach that's going to come in and be like, no, y'all should be way better than this.
Yeah.
Way better than this.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know why are you not doing this? You got to do this. You're capable of this.
Yeah.
They're starving for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard people say, well, Braden Lindsay doesn't have a passion for football. Well, would you have a passion for football if you knew every day you're going out there working, but you're not being given the tools to be at your best?
Yeah.
I mean, it's what I've said. Look, it's hard to go. Football's a hard game mentally,
Yeah.
physically, and even more so mentally. And if you don't feel like you're in a place where you're being given the best resources and you're being challenged and you're getting the most spread out of you, it's like, why am I going to do all this work when you're not?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when and this is one of the things I love, like little things like Clark Lee did when he first got here. One thing changes Clark Lee made is that when we're asking our players to run from drill to drill. So we are, as coaches, are going to run from drill to drill.
Yeah.
I mean, little things like that. But the point is, the players are like, look, it's like somebody made a comment, like I think it was a player said something about like they went in, I forget where I read this, but like they went into the gym one morning and like most of the coaching staff was already in the gym working out, getting their workouts in. Like kids see that and they're like, wait a minute, hold on a second.
Yeah.
I'm dragging butt out here and I'm tired. I'm all this. And those dudes have already got a workout in this morning. You know what I mean? Like that's going to say something.
Yeah.
And when you look at Chancey Stuckey, dude looks like he can still play ball. They got several coaches like that look like they could still play. These kids are hungry for
competition amongst the current staff now. I don't know if it existed now, but there's a lot of trash talking amongst the current staff.
I love that
on the basketball court.
Yeah, I love that because that's going to manifest in everything.
Yeah,
I mean, you're going to have Tommy Reese, and battling verbally with Mike Mickens and Chris O'Leary, and you're going to see Chancey and Mike Mickens like having some fun battles. Like that's what I mean. That's you want that because it's got to be done in a fun way, right?
Yeah.
But like that's what makes football fun. Like I had a friend of mine that he's at Vanderbilt now, but like we would do some of that stuff like during one-on-ones. Like he and I would banter back and forth. It was never disrespect. It was always like it was fun.
Yeah.
But it's like, hey, I'm coming at you, you're coming to me, my guys, and so of course then your players feed on, and that's why we would do it.
Yeah.
Is we would because number one, because we're competitive, and I generally wanted my guys to beat his guys and vice versa. But we knew we were making each other better.
Yeah.
And he knew on Saturday the dudes he was going to face weren't going to be as well coached or as talented as the dudes that his players face on Monday to Friday. And I knew the same thing. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking to see that. And Mike Elko talked about how much better his defense was because they had to face
that offensive
Quentin
line.
Nelson and and I think that's an important thing. But when you look at Chancey Stuckey, I think to your point, Sean, I think this helps make the secondary better. If he's as good as we hope he can be, it's going to make the secondary better because you can't just get by without being really sharp with your technique on Wednesday anymore.
Right.
And I think that's going to help. But I think this is a hungry group of players. The problem is there's some issues that this is what makes Chancey. This is why Chancey's number one. He's going to go into the spring with 4-5 healthies. I mean, one of them being Matt Salerno.
He just got a grad transfer, right?
No, he has not committed yet.
He hasn't committed yet? Okay.
No, he got offered by the kid from Johns Hopkins.
Yeah.
I don't believe he's committed yet.
Okay.
He's being recruited by other schools. But it's Matt Salerno, Deion Colsey, Lorenzo Stiles, Jaden Thomas, and Braden Lindsay.
Braden Lindsay are healthy.
That's it.
Yeah.
And, so that's a challenge, right? Numbers
Absolutely.
and all that. It's a challenge to get kids to buy into the way you're doing it when it's going to be hopefully quite different than the way it was before.
Yeah.
He is stepping in a situation where I don't think that group has a lot of confidence. And I think this is an issue that Harry's going through too, to a degree.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about Harry's situation is I think he has I think it's just line play is just a little bit different. But I think these receivers got their confidence shook a little bit last year, and especially some of the older guys. I mean, when you got to listen to Avery Davis talk about how, hey, how'd you learn to be a good route runner? Well, I watch YouTube videos. Not like, man, Coach Alexander. How embarrassing that is.
Yeah.
That's so embarrassing.
Yeah.
But that's also the exciting thing is like these kids do not get coached how to play. And the fact is they were really good. Like this offense was pretty good last year.
Yeah.
And yet at two incredibly important positions, they didn't know how to play the game.
They know how to play the
right way.
Yeah.
But Coach Stuckey's going to have to, it's a mentality change. Because kids want to be coached, but there's still that shock of this is how the new coach, did that.
Yeah.
And so
it's like, Brian, how do you get on the field? Like they tell you to put in the work, right? To prove yourself, to get up the depth chart. Like, how do you do that when no one is giving you the tools?
Right. Well, that's why younger players had a harder time playing.
Absolutely. And that is something that changes immediately. Guys like Deion Colzie now feel like, man, now I got a shot to really jump up the depth chart. Guys like Jaden Thomas now feel like I have a fresh start. Now I can really show how I can make an impact. It's a good position to be in for those guys, but like you said, it's a lot. It's definitely a gut rehab. It is definitely a gut rehab.
You got to read it out loud, Sean.
I know Stuckey would be a better coach than YouTube was for Avery.
That is such a savage, true comment.
Oh,
Jeff
boy,
Fluke, that is phenomenal.
Irish fans, I will tell you this. The wide receiver coach at Notre Dame, other than Marcus Freeman, might be the most charismatic on the staff.
Oh my gosh,
he might be.
He's an energetic dude. It's him and Mason, to me.
And I think he will have. I'm going to step out on a limb, Brian. I think he will replace, as far as position coaches, as far as respect and love and the way he deals with his players. He will respect what Mike Elston was, a defensive lineman. He will be that for current and future wide receivers.
Wouldn't shock me. It won't shock me at all. But you know what, though? Here's the difference, Sean. It's not going to seem like as big of an outlier as it was when Elston did it.
Agreed.
And
agreed.
For what I mean, but for people who don't, what I mean is Elston was a bit unique. There weren't many coaches at Notre Dame that really bonded with their players away from the field.
Yeah.
And some coaches are that way. Like, look, this is my job. When I go home, I'm away from all that. Elston was like, yeah, it's my job, but like football team is a family.
Right.
And so if I'm going to go home to my family, then players are part of that.
Yeah.
Right. And to me, I look at it and say, man, I think that's going to be, I'm curious to see how that's going to manifest and how that's going to react. I don't know the causality of that. The causality. That's not the word I mean. Like, I don't know what's going to manifest from that. I don't know how that's going to impact the team.
Right.
But I think it's going to go well. I just don't know.
Yeah.
But you're correct. I think Chancey Stuckey's going to be one of those guys. But I mean, I could think, I don't know as much about Jared Parker, so that's why I'm not going to, but I don't think that, I think Dean McCullough is going to be that way. I think Al Washington is going to be that way.
Yeah.
I think it's just, it's something Marcus Freeman clearly emphasized during this whole thing.
Yeah.
Real quick interruption. Juan, I don't know. Juan Lozado is asking why he can't see other comments. I don't know why. That's probably a setting thing on your end. I think everybody else can see it. So you might want to try either refreshing or looking at your settings to see if there's a reason for that. But Sean, I wanted to talk about something because I think it needs to be addressed. I think you and I might have a difference of opinion on this, but I want to talk about, we talked about the press conference. I think the one takeaway for when I'm watching videos and I'm listening to the audio that you sent me and then talking to you. This is a young, energetic staff. And I think that energy is going to, is the older coaches are going to feed off that energy. I think it's a confident coaching staff and not in a arrogant kind of way, but just like I know what I'm doing, and the kid, we're going to be good. I listened to the way that they talk about Marcus Freeman. I thought was really interesting. There's a lot of, I'm here because I believe in that vision, and that vision is going to set me up for my opportunities for success down the road. And a lot of those things. So I'm excited about the coaching staff as a whole. I do think there was one thing from the press conference that I think needs to be addressed, because people are taking this in way different directions, and it's turned into just this big soap opera thing that I want to address. And it is comment that Marcus Freeman made about Tommy Rees, and a comment that Tommy Rees made during his press conference. And I want to stick to what was said in the press conference. And the first part of it was the part where Marcus Freeman basically said that, I asked Tommy, do you want to be here? And I want to kind of get your thoughts on that, because I think with anything, people can hear the same thing and look at it differently. I didn't look at that as Marcus Freeman was questioning whether or not Tommy Rees wanted to be here, as much as it was like, you've got all these people pursuing you. There's all these rumors. Man, do you want to be here or not? To which Tommy responded, of course I want to be here. Then that comment's coupled with what Tommy Rees said about, I'm not going to know where I'm going to be in a year. I think those two comments are being put into one, and they shouldn't, in my opinion. They were two completely different questions, and with two completely different contexts that I think are being used to create a narrative that I don't necessarily think is there, my opinion. But I think you might have a difference of opinion, so I want to give you an opportunity kind of to say, what was your thoughts on that whole dynamic of Marcus Freeman's comment about, do you want to be here? Because he was asked about teams pursuing Dylan McCullough and Tommy Rees.
Yeah. See, first of all, his Marcus Freeman's statement, and I reiterated this yesterday. Tommy Rees was a part of that, but he was talking about all coaches.
Right.
Like, I only want you here if you want to be here.
Do you want me to read the comment, Sean?
You can.
Let me just read the comment that he made, the whole comment, because this was asking about Rees and McCullough. He said, ultimately, the selling point is, do you want to be at Notre Dame?
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe in what Notre Dame can do for your future? We're not looking to match. We're not looking to do anything. We're trying to say, hey, here's the position. Do you believe this is what's best for your career? I had to fight guys for our offensive coordinator. Obviously, I know it's out there that there were a lot of teams and a certain team that wanted him in a couple weeks ago. Ultimately, my conversation with Tommy is, do you want to be here? Is this where you want to be? And do you see yourself getting to your ultimate goals from Notre Dame? Obviously, we were able to fight a lot of people to get him. Same thing with Dylan McCullough. The same thing with Al Golden. When you're at Notre Dame, people want your guys. It's part of it. When you have success, people want a part of that staff. And so ultimately, my job is to continue to lift as I rise. The head coach at Notre Dame, it doesn't get any better than that. But I think we have a staff full of people that have goals and aspirations. And my job as the head coach is to try to continue to do what's best for our players here, but also keep these coaches and individuals to get to their ultimate goal. So his whole "do you want to be here" comment has been turned into him like challenging Tommy, like, do you even want to be here? When that's not what that's not the context of that entire statement, in my opinion. And I think Tommy's being singled out when he made very clear he talked about Dylan McCullough and Al Golden in the same sentence, right? The other thing is I think there was false reporting about Tommy's situation with Miami. People reported that he went down to Miami to interview. That's not true. He did not go down to Miami to interview. So I feel like there's people putting into that statement things that don't belong in that statement, in my opinion, Sean. But I wanted to read the whole thing so people could, as you continue to explain what you're saying, people have the specific context of what Marcus Freeman said.
Yeah. So what you just read, we played that entire clip
Mm-hmm.
in full, and I'll reiterate, because for me, I started out, I made it singular with Tommy Rees, and then I expanded and moved it out. See, I have a problem. I don't know about anybody, but I was always taught your word is your bond.
Mm-hmm.
Period. So for me, my biggest issue, every relationship that I've been in, when you get to the point that you have to ask someone, do you want to be here? You're asking that for a reason. That you're not just pulling that out of the clear blue sky to say, no, it's a reason. Something is transpired to make you feel, as Marcus Freeman, that you have to ask that question. Whatever it is, whatever's been reported, whether it's true, false, or whatever's in, something has taken place to whereas Marcus Freeman felt like he had to ask that question. Not challenging him, but for me, I felt like Marcus Freeman was saying, look, man, forget all of that. All of that, this issue, that issue that might exist, this person wants you, do you want to be here? At this point, I've gone through twists and turns trying to finalize this staff. I need to get this staff done.
Especially after what happened with Elston,
Absolutely.
Lance, and McNulty.
Absolutely. So I spoke from a standpoint of Marcus Freeman. Why is he having to ask this question? If he's asking this question, something has taken place to make him feel like he has to ask that question. And I said multiple times, I'm all for people, upper mobility, doing whatever they want to do, taking phone calls. I'm not here to argue about that. My issue is, for some reason, a month ago, 2 months ago, you stood in front of Notre Dame players and told them that you wanted to bring them a national championship and you chose them over another opportunity. I don't care what happens. You faced those young men and gave them your word. Now, all of a sudden, a month and a half, 2 months later, what's happened?
Nothing. He's still the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame.
This is my issue. What's happening? What's happening? Forget you being the OC. Marcus Freeman felt some type of way where he had to ask that question. What is taking place? That, for me, is where the alarm went off. I told you Wednesday, I was shocked Marcus was that transparent about everything. I was shocked.
Which I love, by the way.
I didn't expect that.
It was nice listening to a press conference where we weren't being lied to, condescended, and just dismissed.
Absolutely.
That was very nice. I've watched it. I still don't take it the way that you're taking it. Now, having said that,
how did I take it? I said I didn't take it that he was challenging Tommy.
No. That there was concern from Marcus. Like, there was concern from Marcus, but like, I feel like even now, the way that you're explaining it, and this could just be the way that you're explaining it and the way I'm taking it, is that there's an anger there. Because you even said you gave your word. Like, my whole thing is he gave his word, and he's still there.
There was no anger.
Not anger. I'm talking about, like, okay, what there's a negative feeling, because you even said, like, you gave your word, and now 2 months later, as if something has changed. Whereas nothing has changed. He's still
when I say you gave your word, I'm speaking from Sean Davis, and how he views it, not Marcus Freeman. Sean Davis is looking at a coach that said whatever, and now I'm listening to a coach say he had to ask that question. So Sean Davis is saying, "What the heck happened?" Is you were totally bought in front of those players 2 months ago. Now,
but that's that right there. What are you? So you're saying you don't think he's bought in?
No,
is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying I don't think he's bought in. I don't know. As I've said,
you're saying you think Marcus Freeman doesn't think he's bought in.
No,
or is concerned about it.
No, I didn't say that. Marcus Freeman is seeing everything that's happening and hearing everything, and instead of going to other people like grown folks do, he went right to the source.
Okay.
And asked the question that you're supposed to ask.
So you're saying he's reacting. His reaction to Tommy Rees was basically what he's hearing.
Like, dude, forget all of that. Do you want to be here?
And Tommy said,
yes. If you don't,
we
can move on.
And
that's fine. So there was no. I never. I hope people didn't feel like I was conveying that was anger from Marcus.
Well, I
Freeman.
mean, I'm getting the sense now that you were like you're upset with Tommy's actions. I guess is kind of the way that I view it.
No, this is why I take the big picture.
Uh-huh.
Yes, college football stinks because I
Right.
think there's a bunch of liars in college football. Coaches, mainly, that will stand in front of players and go through whatever feelings they have and will walk out on their word in a second.
Then
period.
Perfect example.
That's a big
Perfect
picture
example.
for me.
I was interviewing a kid a few years ago, and he was telling me his mom was telling me a story that he was on a visit to an SEC school on a weekend. Went to the coach. There was rumblings that this coach was going to leave for head coaching job. This coach is an offensive coordinator.
Okay.
He said, "Look, mom and the kid now. Look, I'm not going anywhere. This is my alma mater. I love it here, and I'm not going anywhere." By the next day, he had accepted a job at the other school.
Wow.
You don't. This is the whole thing, like with Brian Kelly and LSU. Those things don't happen in that quick of a time. It's like Lincoln Riley lying about like USC and like you don't just like wake up on a Saturday and have no clue that's going on, and all of a sudden, 3 hours later, you're the head coach at USC.
Yeah.
Gee, it just happened so quickly.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't work like that. You're lying.
Yeah.
You looked at that recruit and his mom right in the face and said what you said.
Yeah.
And honestly, you know, that's one thing I did respect about Jim Harbaugh during this whole process this offseason. He flat out told recruits, yes, I'm listening to NFL teams.
I'm listening. He did. He did.
You know, like, good on you. Good on you. I mean, he still handled it in a weird way.
He handled it poorly.
Yeah, but he was honest. And that's what pisses me off so much. Like, you hear all these coaches say, like, you know, I'm with you on the culture of college football. I'm sick of just why can't men just be honest?
That's it.
Why just be honest? There's a time and a place, like, and if you don't lie. Say, hey, look, guys, I've got a game coming up on Saturday. Do you think I'm worried about anything else other than this game? Don't say, oh, of course not. But also, we also have to not turn every situation into that. That this is a general comment, not indirect to you.
Yeah.
Sometimes circumstances change. Like when Will Fuller told people he was going to come back to Notre Dame for a senior year, was he lying to people? Or was he right in the middle of a flipping season and he was completely bought into his teammates? So, of course, I'm going to think I'm going to be back. I'm not thinking about the NFL right now. But then the season is over with and circumstances change.
Right.
Right? But it's the fact that you and I know that things are lies. If a coach says I'm bought in and then 2 months later, an opportunity that comes up that's always been his dream that wasn't there 2 months ago and he made that comment, that's a change in circumstance. Brian Kelly didn't have a change in circumstance. Brian Kelly just flat out lied.
Yeah.
Right? Lincoln Riley just flat out lied. Right? I mean, that's the thing for me. In this instance, you and I know we've talked a lot about the Tommy Rees situation. And I didn't love how certain things were handled with one of the coaching hires. But I still feel like a lot of this stuff with Miami and the NFL is being turned into something that it's not. And so I'm glad you explained that because, again, I took it as you were upset with Tommy like he had done something wrong, and you've clarified it, you know, to me. I think that my takeaway is Marcus and Tommy had a conversation that needed to be had.
Had to happen. And I'm glad Marcus handled it the way it should have been handled.
But I don't think it was out of, and I'm also relaying some private conversations I've had. I don't think it was done out of being angry or frustrated or feeling like your coach wasn't being honest or anything like that. It was more of a, dude, I got a lot of people coming at this guy. I got to make sure that this is where he wants to be. Because when you ask a guy, and here's something about Tommy Rees, whatever your thoughts are on him, if you look Tommy Rees in the eye and you ask him a question, you're going to get an honest answer. You may not like it, but you're going to get an honest answer. I think, can you and I agree on that, Sean? Like,
I told you this the other day on the phone. 98% of the time, I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like he was a little, to use your word, I felt like a few of his answers on Wednesday were a little clunky.
Yeah, clunky. But I think, and that's kind of, let's take it to the comment from Tommy Rees, because I feel like people are taking things and turning them into something that, in my opinion,
we're not. Let me clarify something else. Because people are like, man, you know, what do you want him to do people are coming after him, this, that, and other. Look, I've given my thoughts. I've shared my thoughts with you. What I thought the overall thing behind Mario Cristobal and what he's trying to do, I shared with you. Like, it's not even about that. The big picture for Mario Cristobal is this particular player.
Yeah, Dante Moore. Yeah,
my opinion. Right. That's why.
And there is a relationship that existed with him and Tommy Rees. Tommy Rees has interviewed with Mario Cristobal in the past.
Back to 2019, right?
And he tried to get him an interview this offseason.
Right.
But Tommy was basically like, I'm either going to LSU or I'm staying Notre Dame.
Right.
Right. I mean, he wasn't looking to do that. So, people are taking things and adding them together, in my opinion, that don't belong together. I don't like how Tommy handled the tight end situation, and based on what's being reported, that he didn't like. But I'm also okay with him not being happy about it. But then it turns into Tommy's unhappy, so now he's looking for other jobs. If Tommy Rees didn't want to be here, folks, he wouldn't be here. Miami wanted him. Miami offered him the job. Tommy said no. And it wasn't offered a job after a long back and forth. It was, you know what I'm looking for. I've interviewed you before. You know how I feel about you. I need you here, and here's what I'm willing to pay you. That's basically how the conversation went. And Tommy said, Coach, I appreciate you, but this is where I want to be. And but then there's the other things that people kind of say, okay, well, this goes like he was upset.
This is coming off of something that probably isn't even all that buzz about the Rams and stuff that was generated by somebody else on another network.
Right.
That probably had, if it had any validity.
It's who he thought they should go after, not that he was pursuing it.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like now everything's being taken and turned into it's about this. Like Tommy Rees was mad that he didn't get to pick the tight ends coach. So he called up Mario Cristobal and was looking to leave. That's not how this conversation went.
No.
And then this is the thing he said. And again, Tommy, I did not feel like Tommy handled the press conference as well as he should have. There were some comments that I did not like about it. But the thing I do respect about Tommy, he's going to give you his honest opinion. It's like, here's the thing. We can't bitch as fans and media, and I'm not talking about you, Sean, and just in general about coaches lying to us. But then when they're honest with us, we get pissed. We get mad. He shouldn't have said that.
Honest. Yeah.
Why did he say that? He shouldn't.
You can't have it both ways.
You can't. Tom, that's what I said to you. If Marcus Freeman went and looked, if you went up to Tommy Rees right now and asked him any question, he's going to tell you the truth. And the thing I've learned, and I've had very few interactions with Coach Rees, but the one thing I've learned is if he doesn't want to tell you something, he'll just say, I'm not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
He's not going to lie to you and disrespect you and just give you some BS. And say like, that's our business, or that's not what I'm not going to talk about that. And but if he's going to give you an answer, it's going to be how he truly feels.
Yeah.
He's been very open about that. And it's like, we all say we want that until someone actually is that way. And then they're like, wait a minute, you shouldn't say those kind of things. You shouldn't say you were really close to taking the LSU job. You shouldn't say that, you don't necessarily be honest, right? We got you. If you want honesty, then you can't complain when the honesty isn't what you want to hear.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the reality. And so the fact that look, here's the deal. The fact that Marcus Freeman gave Tommy Rees the autonomy that he gave him to be the driver of the hires at running back, receiver, and offensive line says a lot about what Marcus Freeman thinks about Tommy Rees.
Yes.
I think there's been a lot of bad narratives put out by people, including this whole Tommy Rees has full autonomy on offense to hire whoever he wants, and there's nothing Marcus Freeman can do about it. Well, that's clearly false.
That's been proven.
Right? But that's the thing is like, there's a lot of people trying to create a freaking soap opera around Notre Dame football, right? And that's my issue. And Tommy Rees is becoming sort of the guy that people are using to do that. And part of it is because Tommy's honest. What's going to happen is Tommy's going to quickly realize me being honest is bite me in the ass time and time and time again. So I'm just going to start giving you guys BS answers or just not talk to you. And that's unfortunate, right? Because it's like, you want me to be honest, but then when I do, you guys take and you run with it a million different ways. And here's a perfect example. This was a comment that Tommy Rees talked about about being allowed to sort of lead the direction of the offense.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is what Coach Reese said. I think anytime you're put in an experience that's new, you can learn a lot of lessons and it can be invaluable. I don't know where my career is going to be a year, 2 years, 5. I don't have answers to that. I know that from when December 1 hit until now, I will be a better coach moving forward and I will be a better leader moving forward because of the relationships and the interactions I've had with Freeman. I know that for a fact. What that leads to, I'm not sure. I'm not really worried about that right now, but I do think that there will be a time when I'll look back on this experience and understand that it's sort of a very valuable for whatever's next. I don't have any problem with that comment. Tommy Reese is 29 years old. Marcus Freeman's 35. He's not going anywhere anytime soon. Tommy Reese is not going to be Marcus Freeman's offensive coordinator the next 9 years, right? So, of course, he has aspirations. He's never hidden that he has other aspirations. But people took that as him. They stopped the context after he said, I'm not sure I'm going to be a year from now. Context ended. That, to me, was a clunky comment from Tommy.
Absolutely.
But it was not a comment that was what I think it's being turned into. I'm not saying by you, so I'm talking about.
What's that?
People are saying that Tommy's basically saying, and this is kind of how the reaction on the message board on Twitter from people calling me, is that Tommy's basically saying, I may not be back next year.
No,
that wasn't the context of, you didn't tell me that.
I told you what my biggest issue was.
Right.
Like, dude, we got Dante Moore on the hook.
Right. I get that.
Like, don't talk about next year. Like,
but I think to me, the way he said it was clunky, but he said next year, 2 years, 5. I mean, that's like, we want honesty. At the beginning of this whole thing, we said, these coaches lie to kids and they lie, but Tommy Reese is being honest. I don't know what the future holds for me. So I want
awareness as well.
What's that?
Honesty. I want honesty, but I want you to be aware.
That's correct. But to me, the issue is the clunkiness of the answer. Not that he said what he said, because he said 1 year, 2 year. Because if he's here 5 years, Dante's gone by then, right?
Well, he won't see, if they sign Dante Moore, he won't see Dante Moore graduate at Notre Dame. That's my opinion.
Right.
Because if Dante Moore has one good year, stacked on type of Tyler Buckner having a good year, Tommy's gone to the NFL.
Yeah.
He's gone. He has the connections. People already know him. They already have the eyes on him. He's gone.
Right.
But I think I think everybody connected to Notre Dame fans know the connections Tommy Reese has.
Right.
We know the aspirations he has.
He's never hidden it.
He's never hidden it, and we're very well aware of it.
Mm-hmm. So are recruits.
Very well. So the clunkiness of that answer, I have a problem with the clunkiness of the answer. I guess that's the best word. You need to be aware, answer it a little bit better. I don't think you were trying to be crass or misleading with your answer.
Talking about, hey, I'm probably not going to be here a year from now.
Right.
I think he should have followed up with something a little bit about, I'm committed to this. But that wasn't the context of the question. The context of he was trying in a bit of a clunky way. Again, 29-year-old coach is still learning how to say the right thing, and we're getting frustrated with his honesty. But that's the evolution of a young coach as well, is he was being asked about and talking about what he's learning right now.
Yeah.
He was trying to make a comment about being in the present, is what I took that comment as. And I think Sean, you know my feelings about this situation. If I thought Tommy Reese was saying what people are telling me he's saying, I'd call him out on it. I think you know that by now.
You've called Tommy out
crush
before.
Him for it.
You've called him out before.
Yes.
So that's not a problem.
I just don't think
that's not a problem.
we can argue and debate, not argue. We can say that's not how I would have answered it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that he's saying what other people are saying he said.
Yeah.
That's my problem. And that's the soap opera thing that I'm talking about. Because what's going to happen is there's going to be enough of these stories where Marcus is just going to be like, fine, you're not going to talk to my coaches anymore. If you all are going to keep taking everything that's said and turn it into this soap opera drama, then I'm just not going to make my coaches available to you. Or the coaches are going to go up there and give you really BS, like mechanical answers, and you're not going to get what you want. Because a big part of the reason that coaches aren't honest not a big part, a part for some coaches, is because they know if I say what is the truth, then
Yeah.
that's going to be the story, and people are it's going to get turned into something that it's not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if a coach ever said, "Yeah, I'd like, I'd like to be a head coach someday. Or I'd like to be an offensive coordinator." So if an NFL team, if Sean McVay called me and said, "Hey, I want you to be my offensive coordinator," hey, guess what? There's some early 30-year-olds that have coached under Sean McVay as offensive coordinators that are now head football coach in the NFL. And that's what Coach Freeman was saying. These guys, we know they have aspirations. My job as the head coach is to get them there, but you got to be bought into right now.
Hey,
but I didn't feel he was then challenging whether or not Tommy Rees was bought in as much as, dude, I just lost 3 coaches that I wasn't expecting to lose. Is it going to be a 4th?
Exactly.
Because of what I'm hearing? But it wasn't anything that Tommy did. It was all the noise about the Rams. It was about this. But Tommy never talked to the Rams about the offensive coordinator job, as far as I know.
But wouldn't you agree? Yeah, I might be wrong, right? A lot of times I go I look at things based upon, any time in my life that my wife has said we need to talk. It never went well.
Never goes well.
It never went well. When I get the tap on the shoulder,
I'm thinking we need to go on a vacation to the Bahamas this year. What do you think? It's never that. It's never followed with that.
It's never that.
No.
So every time in my life when I've experienced hearing somebody hear these words or hearing it myself, like, do you want to? When I hear that, that is a call to block out all that. Let's get down to the nitty gritty.
Right.
Get all of that other stuff.
Just tell me why we're here.
Just tell me why we're here.
Right.
And all I need to know from you is, do you want to be here? And for me, that, regardless of what is truth, what's false, that is something in Marcus Freeman's mind to say, hey, wait a minute.
Right.
Let me figure out what's going on, because of what he's gone through, the twists and turns he talked about, to ultimately get to this point,
right,
to almost have his staff done. And then here comes this at the last moment. So
at an important position.
Absolutely. That's not the easiest position to fill.
Right. Especially this late in the process.
Yes. And it impacts recruiting.
Right.
And
I believe that Marcus knows that this offensive staff is going to do some things on the recruiting trail with Tommy at the head of it.
Yes.
And he wants to at least get that for a year or two.
But this is something else, Brian. I have everybody in the chat. If you watch Lucky Lefty, we have sung the praises of Tommy Rees because of what we've heard from offensive recruits in the class of 2023. He has done a fantastic job of putting Notre Dame in great position. Carnell Tate, top wide receivers, Dante Moore, anybody you can name, he's the spearhead to put them in great position. He's the guy, and Marcus Freeman now comes in, and Marcus Freeman is going to be the closer in a lot of these situations. Now you see other publications saying that Notre Dame leads for Dante Moore. That's all because of the groundwork that Tommy Rees has put in over the last 2+ years for Dante Moore. We sang his praises, but we're not scared to say, yo, Tommy, I don't know. I don't know about this one. I don't know about this answer. I don't particularly like the way you might have handled that. Based upon what we've heard and what's been reported, I don't know, but it is what it is.
Right.
Ultimately, our point is Marcus Freeman doesn't ask you that question if he doesn't feel like, man, let me cut through the minutia and get to the point.
But it also doesn't mean that he's reacting to anything Tommy has done.
Oh, but this is what I want to ask you. Because based upon what you just said, if Tommy had talked to Cristobal and immediately talked to Marcus and said, yo, this is what went down. I just want to let you know I'm committed to you. I'm committed to Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman doesn't have to ask that question.
Oh, I think he does still. And so my understanding is that Marcus was not unaware of the conversations he was having with Mario Cristobal.
You said conversations or conversation? Now, I just want
Conversations
to be
meaning like at multiple times. I'm talking about
okay.
like the one in December. I'm talking about like the relationship that he has with Mario Cristobal.
Okay.
So Marcus Freeman was not, my understanding, talking to people, was not unaware that Mario reached out to Tommy and made an offer. Was not unaware of that. My take on it was that Marcus was more concerned about, he knows how many people are coming after Tommy. More so than, like, I think the timing of it, it's being turned into Miami and Cristobal happened and Marcus went to him and said, "Do you want to be here or not?" My understanding is that's the timing of it. And the Miami was kind of like the final straw, but it's more about Marcus, because there's people calling Marcus to ask to talk to Tommy. That's what y'all have to understand. Sean knows this, but like, if an NFL team is going to reach out to Tommy Rees, they're going to call Marcus Freeman first. That's just courtesy that most teams will respect.
Right.
That's just how it goes. And so I don't think that any of that changed here, but I think at the end of the day, to your point, Sean, when you're this close to having your staff finalized, you've got one guy that's getting a lot of interest, because he also said, I had to say the same thing to Deland, and I had to say the same thing to Al Golden. Now, Deland obviously had already agreed to take the Notre Dame job and then talk to the Giants.
Can I say something about the Deland situation? Because Deland kept it a buck. As Charlie White's last belt loop says, Deland kept it a buck with the media. He was like, look, I had this job. I came in. This is where I wanted to be. The Giants came with both barrels blasted.
Right.
Like, yo, we want you. And they made it tough.
Right.
And ultimately, because of my end goals and what I want to do, this is the best place for me to be.
Right.
But I'm not going to lie to you. It was hard because the Giants pretty much threw everything at me.
But he'd already given his word to Marcus Freeman that he was coming to Notre Dame. Like, why is it different then than it is for Tommy? You know, because you mentioned earlier that.
Let me explain.
Okay.
Let me explain. He said he had to fight to keep dealing.
Right.
Dealing was very transparent. And to me, I got the impression that there was a very open back and forth conversation about what was going on.
Correct. With Marcus and Dealand.
With Marcus Freeman.
There was also that with Marcus and Tommy.
I'm not sure of that.
I'm just telling you what my sources have told me. And my sources aren't Tommy Rees or anyone related to Tommy Rees.
And I had a source that before the story about Miami broke, I had a source to text me like, yo, this is what's going on.
Right.
And I was like, all right. And I wasn't even going to
So you and I have talked about that. I still think that source was reacting to what was being said. Right? Because as I said all along, when the Miami stuff came out, I have a couple sources very close to this one. And they said, he's not going to Miami. It's not going to, there was never really a threat of him. Miami offered him, like, kind of like the Giants. Miami offered him a big payday.
They had to.
Big payday. And it was dismissed. Right. I mean, it was like, hey, thanks for the offer. I'm good. Like, because to me, if it wasn't like, Tommy could have gone back to there, hey, look, Miami offered me this. You got give me more money. It was thanks, but no thanks. Right. So I think that we're seeing a lot of people reacting to different things. My understanding of it, and again, I could be wrong, is that Marcus going to Tommy, the Miami part was part of it, but it was just a culmination of all these things, right? And you need to find out, like you said, go straight to the horse's mouth and find out, is Dan Orlovsky saying this because you told him to, or you asked him to, or because you have a relationship, or is he just giving his opinion? And my thing is, I think Marcus Freeman would have been naive not to do that. I think if Marcus Freeman would have just assumed that everything is good, Tommy's an alum, of course he wants to be here, and just let it go, that would have been a big mistake. In my opinion, that would have been naive and foolish. In my opinion,
I have to be fair and say this is because I don't have 100% facts, so I have to say it's an assumption on my part, since it's not 100% facts. I'm going to say that the conversation between Marcus and Dealand was different than the conversation between Marcus and Tommy, and I feel like Dealand was a conversation that was had where Dylan came to Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the start of the conversation, Marcus had to go to Tommy. I will say this. Tommy probably never even said certain things because it was nothing to it.
Right.
That happens. When you feel like there's nothing to it, that's like, if you're dating a girl and she sees you walking down the hallway talking to another girl during lunch period or something.
Right.
She asks you about it after school, and you're like,
she asked me where the reading room was.
Yeah.
Like,
I didn't tell you because there's really nothing to tell. Like, I told them no.
Yeah. Every time a girl stops and asks me directions to something, I don't need to tell you about that. Right.
So, but I know I've heard it. Like, you should have told me first anyway. And it's like, okay,
sure,
all right, cool. I'll cool. But it doesn't.
My understanding is that happened.
I understand. I told people yesterday, this is not a bash. No, stop that. This is not about bashing Tommy. This is about what we've heard, how we interpret what the information that's been put out there, and for Marcus Freeman to feel like he had to ask that. Certain things were floating around, and he had to go to the horse's mouth.
And I think that it was more of reacting to that stuff,
than
it was Tommy's hiding something from me. Because my understanding is they did talk about that, about the Miami thing. Because it was a conversation like we had said. If a Giants are reaching out, there's a way that they reach out, right? Mario Cristobal reaching out to a guy he's already known for years is probably going to look a little bit different.
Yeah, it's his direct line. There's no reason. Yeah,
and it's kind of like, hey man, if like I've had head coach say, look, you don't need to talk to me about every team that reaches out to you. Just talk to me about the teams that reach out to you that you're interested in.
Yeah,
because if every time somebody that may be all you do.
Yeah,
it's hey, by the way, I got another call today. That's when you're like, okay, man, like
Yeah.
So my whole thing is I think a lot of this is a perception problem. And I think this is where Tommy's sort of candidness and youth are sort of creating a narrative that I don't think is there. I think there's genuine concern that Tommy Reese is trying to get poached. I don't think the concern.
Why can't we just know that it's going to happen?
What do you mean?
Like, he's going to leave.
No, I mean now. The concern is now. With all the teams coming at him now, because there's still NFL jobs open, and like I said, the Mario Cristobal thing.
You know why? That goes off of because, dude, they're cool. I think they were cool when Marcus first got the job, and they're cool now. Was there some type of, and I hate to use the word friction because that makes it seem like there was a beef or something. Was there some type of disappointment with the way certain things went
Disagreement,
down? Yeah. I'm sure feelings were involved. I'm sure.
Sure.
Just like feelings might have been involved the other way that led Jamarcus Shepard out to Washington.
Right.
So
you and I have had disagreements like that.
Yeah. So it's like, hey, man, it is what it is. There's disagreements. There's feelings. They exist.
Right.
You package all of that around, here comes a call. Look, in my opinion, Mario Cristobal was playing chess.
Yeah.
Very aware of what was going on, what was happening, what he might have heard. Well, man, let me place a call now.
Because even if you don't get Tommy Reese, you've planted that seed of uncertainty about Tommy Reese. If Mario Cristobal would have called, because his offensive coordinator job has been open for a while.
Yeah.
And he just now reached out to Tommy Reese.
And he was told no once already.
Yeah.
According to you, right?
Right. That was at Oregon.
Right.
Yeah. Right. My thing is, if he would have called Tommy a week before Jared Parker was hired, this is a completely different narrative.
Totally
the timing of it. And I think that's where you may be, and I don't have evidence of this. I don't know this. I think your read on it is pretty good. That this is part, I want Tommy Reese in part, because he wants Tommy Reese, but he knows he's not going to get Tommy Reese. most likely he's not going to get Tommy because he knows Tommy. He knows Tommy's not leaving Notre Dame for another OC job at another school. He's not going to do it. But you make that call, you have that conversation, you leak it out to people because some of the leaks that came out were really incorrect as far as how it went down,
and that's
which tells me they were coming from Miami, not Notre Dame.
And you said that's one of the things Tommy was upset about.
Correct. Was what was being reported about what went down was incorrect.
Right.
And to me, that makes me think it came from people in Miami, not from people in Notre Dame. Right? I mean, why would someone at Notre Dame tell people that Tommy went down to Miami to interview when Tommy didn't go down to Miami to interview? Who's more likely to get that wrong? Somebody at Miami, right? A source at Miami.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, so if I can't get Tommy, I can at least sow the seed of doubt with Darnell Tate. Carnell Tate. Dante Moore, Jalen Brown, Cedric Irvin Jr. Notre Dame's going down to Southern Florida in this recruiting cycle. They're hitting it hard.
Yep.
It's as much, to your point. It's chess. It's as much that as it is. I actually think Mario Cristobal knew he wasn't going to get Tommy Rees. If he really thought he was going to get Tommy Rees, he would have reached out to Tommy Rees the minute he knew he was getting a Miami job.
Right.
Because there was still so much uncertainty at Notre Dame.
When all of this broke,
right.
My main point was this isn't about Tommy Rees.
Right. Well, it was to a degree that he wanted Tommy Rees, but it was the timing of it wasn't as much about that.
He knew it was a Hail Mary.
Yeah. Which is why he was able to go to Josh Gaddis so quickly.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. So but now that people on the Notre Dame side have taken that and they're running with it. And they're doing exactly what Mario Cristobal wants them to do.
That's what I'll ask you. Right. Because I'm new to Irish Breakdown. I'm new with Lucky Lefty podcast. Why, if everything was being leaked from down there, why were publications Notre Dame centered so quick to grab hold to it and just put it out there like it was gospel?
I'm not touching that one.
Oh,
I can't speak to what other people do.
This is what the Saturday show is for, dog.
I can't speak to what other people do. I told you I'm trying to turn over a new leaf in 2022, right? So you set me up trying to start some stuff.
We were supposed to give people a peek into our phone conversation.
You know exactly why that's happening, but I'm not saying it on this show. For all I can do is I can only report what I'm told.
Yeah.
And I think you also know me. I don't report things that I'm told by one person unless it is the person involved.
Multiple.
Right. But when there's multiple sides to a thing, there isn't always just one person involved.
Right.
There's a lot of things I haven't reported just in the last couple of months because I only heard it from one source. So I'm just not going to report it if I can't get confirmation from multiple sides. And just the conversation I've had about this Tommy Rees thing is that the timing, it's like three things happened that all really have a whole lot to do with each other that center around the fact that I need to make sure this guy wants to be here, but they weren't necessarily this was because of this, which was because of this. And I think that's where I talk about the soap opera aspect of it.
Yeah.
He was mad about this, so he went and looked for the Miami job. That's not at all how it happened.
Did anybody report that?
I don't read what that's what comes back to me.
Yeah, from what the reports that I've read.
Sean, you and I know this, right? Like, I don't read what other people write. But you and I have had plenty of conversations where I'll call you like, hey, man, did you say this during your show?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. But that's what somebody came, right? It's the telephone game, right? But there's a lot of drama, and people like drama. And so I take some up with a grain of salt. But so then I say, okay, well, let me make some phone calls and figure out what's going on. At the end of the day, here's what I think happened. Marcus Freeman knows that Tommy Rees is coveted by college teams and NFL teams. Marcus Freeman wants Tommy Rees at Notre Dame. He wants to make sure that this is a situation where, because Marcus Freeman is very well aware that this is a business of people don't lie right to your face, right? He knows that. I guarantee he's experienced that.
Yeah.
And so, hey, look, man, I'm not gonna play this game. I'm gonna go right to Tommy and say, hey, here's the deal. And he said, I fought to keep him here. I mean, he said that about him and Dylan. And that's more of a saying.
And he said
people
it about
want my
Al
guys,
too.
Right? People want these guys.
Yeah.
But the reality is if Tommy Rees didn't want to be at Notre Dame, he's had 2 jobs now that have offered him more money than he's making at Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
If this is about Tommy being unhappy, he would have taken the money and run. You know, I wish. I mean, what am I? What's he supposed to say? I'm gonna not take a phone call and diminish this relationship with this coach, knowing because when you talk about Tommy Rees, what if Marcus Freeman decides in the year he doesn't want Tommy Rees here anymore? I mean, so it's not always about like Tommy Rees determines his own fate. A coach can decide he doesn't want you there anymore.
Yeah, if you don't
So
get the
you've
job,
burned every bridge that you've had because you had to worry about reports and all this other stuff going on. And you know what I mean? Like that's a bad career move too. I think a lot of this is just there's a lot of people at Notre Dame and other schools that like to talk and they like to be sources and they like to get stuff out. And there's been a lot of stuff reported this offseason about Notre Dame and its coaching searches that just some of it's just been things change, right? This is the circumstance now and it changed. There's been a lot of stuff that I just flat out know is not true or you took the truth and turned it into something that it wasn't. There's been a lot of that. I don't want to prescribe the motive. Sometimes it's just you got a bad source.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Tom Loy's the person that reported that Tommy went down to Miami. I don't for a second think that Tom Loy's lying about that. Not for a second. What I think is Tom was given information that just wasn't correct. It was clearly from someone he trusts. It's just bad info. It happens sometimes. I was told 2 weeks before Dylan McCullough got the job at Notre Dame that he's not interested in the job. It's not going to be him.
Yeah.
Either things changed or I was given bad info. It happens. So it's not always that I think people in the media are looking to do something nefarious.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get bad info. It happens. But I think there are too many people in the media. So I'm clearly not talking about Tom Loy now because I just defended Tom. I think there are other people that understand the value of soap operas equal drama equals attention equals clicks equals revenue. And at the end of the day, that's kind of where it comes from to me. Yeah. And sometimes it's just there are 2 sides to a story. And I've got this side and I'm going to report it. You know, it is what it is. But I just feel like when we read those things in context, I think it changes a little bit about what exactly was said and how it was said.
Yeah. If anybody,
doesn't mean you have to agree with it all.
Yeah.
You can still dislike what, you know, that he had to go there and ask that question, but it wasn't a situation where he was pissed. I'm sick of Rees interviewing. I'm going down to his office now. And do you want to be here or not? Like, that's how it's gotten turned into a lot of people coming to me. Like, that's how it went down. Freeman was mad and he went down to Tommy and he said, do you want to be here or not? That's not how it went down.
That's a discredit to both of them.
Exactly. Because if Marcus Freeman felt that way, it wouldn't have been a, do you want to be here? To have been like, hey man, go find another job. Right? I mean, if there was that, so it frustrates
me. From the standpoint, I think it was, for me, it was all encapsulated. Marcus Freeman did an incredible job with that answer, putting everything into focus. Like, yo, there's been a lot of twists, a lot of turns. I had to fight to keep these 3 guys. I had to ask Tommy this. Like, yo, at this point, he was very honest. First question, were you shocked with Mike Elston? Yes, I was surprised. I was like, wow. I was surprised. Didn't know, but we know what it is. If coaches feel like they want to be somewhere else, right. I'm happy with that.
I think this is part of it too. I think there's just some people that have this feeling. If you met Tommy Rees in a restaurant, I bet he'd be a jerk. I haven't met Tommy Rees in a restaurant. I've been around Tommy Rees. I've never gotten that impression. I think people take confidence as what's that?
I've only been around him once, and that was on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And
you know guys that played with him though.
I know guys that played with him, and I told you.
Yeah.
I said I was always told that he was very cool, unflappable.
Right.
You know.
But people take that as being a jerk because he's confident in himself. He speaks his mind.
Yeah.
And and he's really smart. Yeah. And some people take that as always. Look, and I've had some conversation with Coach Rees, not a lot.
Yeah.
and uh, like, oh, here's a perfect example. He and I didn't talk ever the first few years, and then we finally kind of had a conversation about a topic, and I don't reveal too much, but it was a productive conversation.
Okay.
The very next time I did an interview with there was a Zoom interview with Tommy Reese, not my interview, but
Right.
he responded with just he goes, hey, hey coach, thanks for asking that. I took that as a sign of respect, right?
Right.
Now, Tom Reese is 29 years old. He's an offense coordinator at Notre Dame. I'm just some former Division III 1AA coach that runs a website.
Right.
He has no reason to show me any level of respect in that regards if he was a jerk, but he did, right? And I'm someone who has been very critical of him in the past. So I don't view him that
Very
way at
true.
all. I just think he's got a very matter-of-fact way of saying things.
Abrasive. He can
Yes.
be abrasive at
But he's
times.
not abrasive. He just comes across. I think
Yeah.
I guess I'm sympathetic because I think I'm that. I think I get that rap. I'm
You're a
very
teddy.
matter of fact, and I'm speak my mind, and
You're
I'm
a
this.
teddy bear.
And some people are going to take it as that because you and I have talked. But there's people like I say my mind, I speak my mind. I have a very outgoing personality. And it takes people say, oh, that guy's a jerk. But okay. I mean, I'm not going to change who I am because you read me incorrectly and you make assumptions about who I am. And I think that's kind of so. I guess that's kind of why I defend Tommy a little bit on this because I know I've never met anyone that says, "Man, Tommy Reese is a prick."
Yeah.
Tommy Reese is a jerk. I've literally never met anyone that actually knows him that has that opinion. Trust me, there's coaches at Notre Dame that I've talked to. People like, yeah, I can't stand that guy. That guy's a prick. That guy's a douche. That guy's arrogant. Trust me, somebody would have told me that by now.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean, Sean.
Yeah.
And I saw. But I think that his mannerisms kind of lead some people just make opinions about him that I don't think are fair. And I think at the end of the day, there's still a lot of people that hold against Tommy the fact that Brian Kelly hired him in 2019. That's just a fact. That they're never going to give him his due because of that. He shouldn't have had this job to begin with.
But what
Is
has
how
he
some people,
done?
and that's unfair to me.
Honestly, Tommy hasn't done anything, in my opinion. Once again, this is my opinion. Tommy hasn't done anything as an offensive coordinator for the fan base to not like him,
Right.
in my opinion.
Except he did one thing. He said yes when Brian Kelly offered them the job.
That's it.
Like,
Because I mean, you can blame him for like certain things, but then you're not looking at the totality of what was going on offensively. You can blame him for not running the ball more in the Fiesta Bowl. Like, really? We're just going to keep running to a wall 20, 30 times?
Right.
Look, with Tommy Reese has plenty of spotlight on him going into this season. Plenty. No more connection to Brian Kelly. His offense, his recruiting class in 2023. We don't need to say anything else. We don't need to say anything else. And we can put to bed what was said in the press conference. It is what it is. People are going to feel the way they feel about it, have their opinions. At the end of the day, we all more than likely have come to understand that he is going to be in the NFL at some point. Like you said, he's not about to be the OC at Notre Dame for 9 years. It's not happening.
Right.
Or for 5 years or what. Like, we know that's coming. We're very well aware of that. I just need him to be a little bit more aware when he's talking to the media.
And that's part. But see, that's the thing is like it's gonna turn out because these things get turned the way that they get turned. He's just gonna stop giving his real opinion.
I don't want that's another thing.
That's gonna happen.
He should always be himself.
No, he'd be himself, but he's just not going to give us answers. He's not going to be as forthcoming. He's not going to speak his mind. He's going to give us just the okay, I'm going to give you this little bit, but that's whatever. That's just the reality because if I'm going to say the truth and then you're going to turn it into something that it's not. And I'm not saying you did this, Sean, or that I did this. It's happened. Then I'm just going to stop giving you. I mean, that's just how it's going to be. At the end of the day, however, I think that Marcus Freeman was smart to go to Tommy and
Yes.
ask him that question, because I think Marcus knows that if you go to Tommy's face and ask a question, you're going to get the truth.
Yes.
Like, he's going to tell you the truth. But I think the fact that Tommy has been offered multiple jobs this offseason that would have paid him more. Now, trust me, Notre Dame stepped up and paid Tom Reese well. He's not making $200,000, right? I mean, he's making money now, but he still has been offered 2 jobs this season that offered him significantly more money.
Yeah.
Right. The fact that he turned both of those down to stay at Notre Dame says a lot about where he wants to go. Now, I don't think Tommy is pursuing NFL jobs, but at the end of the day, when your goal is this, when those people reach out, you're going to listen. Just like Marcus Freeman taking the Notre Dame job, leaving Cincinnati, leaving behind his mentor, his former position coach, because he has aspirations. The thing for me that coaches have to understand and the NCAA has to fix is there has to be a better time and place for this. There's a time and a place where you listen, and a time and place say, hey, man, that window's gone. I'm not leaving. Right? Like, yeah, this would have been a great opportunity, but dude, you should have asked me this 2 months ago. I'm not leaving my team in June. You know what I mean? I think those are the things that I would say.
There's something in the chat. What did Lucky Lefty say? I see Jeff Fluke is saying Lucky Lefty never said that.
Lucky Lefty.
Charlie Weiss last belt loop said Lucky Lefty said something. What did we say?
I don't know. So let me see here. Here we go. Mark Stallman said LL also said he took the trip to Miami. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, you're wrong. We said it was reported.
Right.
We don't know.
Right.
Once again, according to what has been published by other Notre Dame publications, this is what happened.
And it's not what happened.
And
but that was reported
multiple times.
But it was incorrect.
On multiple podcasts.
Yeah. Just for the record, so everybody understands, it was not, that was not correct information. That he did not go to Miami and interview for that job.
The first person, you are the first person,
right,
that I have heard,
right,
around this situation to say he didn't go to Miami,
right, and
that's based upon your sources,
right. I'm 100% confident that I'm correct on that, like 100% confident on that. But again, that's people have to understand is you saying it's being reported is not you saying this is happening.
Yes.
It's saying this is being reported.
Yes. So, and I'll stand by everything I said on my podcast. Irish Breakdown is not my podcast.
You're a part of Irish Breakdown.
I'm a part of Irish Breakdown. Yeah. This is not my podcast. You will catch me far more animated on Lucky Lefty.
I don't like that. I mean, I want you to still be animated.
Oh, well, I mean, it's the combination of myself and Malik and the comedy that we bring to it. So,
so I'm not as fun as Malik. Okay.
It's a different, it's a different mix, a different gumbo of sorts. But I will say this, because I see Demetrius Rex, he's with us a lot. Yes, I felt like in certain situations, Tommy did act like a brat. It's like I did. I'll say it again. Like, dude, you didn't a tight end coach? Like, what are we, man? Coach, and that's my feelings. Like, coach is like you send somebody up to your upper boss for an interview. They disagree. They don't like it. All right, fine. And once again, that was according to what was reported by other publications. So once again, Lucky Lefty Podcast never said he went to Miami. We never said he was mad or about the hire of Jared Parker. We didn't say that. Other people said that. We discussed it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like what we took from it and how we talked about it, that's another issue. But I stand by the things I've said. So, and I think I reiterated that today. Like you said, you see things a little bit different. I'm on the other side of the fence. But not once did either one of us ever say Marcus Freeman was mad with Tommy Reese and stormed down to his office and said, "You better tell me."
Right.
No one said that.
Right. But that's how these things go. And that's my frustration. I'm tired of the soap opera stuff. That's what's driving me nuts, to be completely honest with you. And one of the reasons I wanted to dive into this conversation today. All right, so a couple super chats we're going to get to here before we go. Corey D with a super chat says, Sean not wearing the polo today. What's
You
going
got to
on?
check. Oh, hold on. Just because you don't see the horse doesn't mean it's not on the tag.
There's a polo under there somewhere. All right, Let Manager says, off topic, but curious on your thoughts on Notre Dame offering Stephylan Green with more in Houston in the chamber. Just wondering what your thoughts are.
Al Washington likes him.
Right. I mean, here's as simple as this. I haven't watched the kid yet. But as far as I know, Jason Moore and Devin Houston haven't committed. And until they do, you got to keep recruiting.
Yeah.
You got to keep recruiting. I mean, that's called good recruiting. If you think this kid can play and play at a level that you like, and those other guys are still wanting to take up, because until they commit to you and sign those papers, it's not a given that you're going to get those kids, especially when they're uncommitted.
Right.
It would be foolish of him to not keep recruiting and not look for other players.
Yeah.
Because then they say no, and you're like, well, who am I going to get now?
Yeah.
So that's how I take it. I mean, look, it's like Tommy Rees still recruiting other quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Look, I know for a fact that Dante Moore's the number one quarterback, but what if he doesn't pick Notre Dame? Right? Like they have a different approach than I do. I've said I'd be all in on Dante.
Yeah.
But
what if he says no? That Notre Dame needs to be all in on Dante.
Right.
So,
but they're all on it, all in to the degree that he's their top guy. That's who they want. But at the same time, we have to recruit other quarterbacks because what if he says no?
Yeah.
And that's true at every position. So I don't have thoughts on the player specifically because I haven't watched this film yet. But I think it's smart. Until those kids commit, you got to keep recruiting.
Yeah.
You got to keep recruiting. So we definitely agree on that. Two from Charlie Wells says, Charlie,
you say you think he's going to commit around the summertime?
No, I said I think he'll commit by no later than late spring.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, which is June.
Okay.
And that's when, and I'm talking like by the calendar, not weather.
Okay.
I mean, summer starts what, like June 18th?
Yeah.
I think he'll commit sometime before then, maybe right after.
Yeah.
Because we have the visits in June and all that. He may take visits, but I think he'll decide sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. Two from Charlie Weiss's last belt loop before we get out of here. Says the issue is Coach Freeman wasn't allowed to bring in his own OC. He was forced to keep Tommy to become head coach. LL covered this. I don't know what LL covered, but that's just not accurate. It was not this notion that if it was either hire Tommy Rees or you're not getting the head coaching job is not.
Explain the process.
Yeah. So first of all,
explain the process because contractually, Elston and Rees were taken care of before Marcus.
Right. Freeman. My understanding, talking to sources very close to the situation, is as soon as Brian Kelly left, Marcus Freeman let people know he wanted the job. When you do that, you're going to also tell your boss, here's who I'd like to have with me. If you're going to consider me for this job and you think I'm a legitimate candidate, I don't want to lose those guys. I want Tommy Rees. I'm just telling you right now, why would Jack Swarbrick force Marcus Freeman to keep someone he already wanted to keep anyway?
Force is a strong word.
But that's what's being said, and that's what's in the question. This is what's been said to me. People have told me, not sources, but people have told me that what's being reported is that they negotiated with Tommy Rees first because if Tommy said no, they were going to hire Luke Fickell as the head coach. And I don't believe that that's accurate. Not any good source that I've had.
Who was reporting that?
I don't know. That's what people are telling me is being said. And so, again, I don't read other people's stuff, Sean.
And you know I do. I do.
Sure, and that's fine. I have my reasons why.
Yeah.
And you understand those, and they're in my circumstances different than yours as the publisher of a site.
Right.
And so that is not at all what's been told to me from the beginning. I've been told from the beginning in conversations with, and again, I have some close sources that are pretty close to this one. Marcus and Tommy clicked from jump at Notre Dame. They get along really well. NFL teams and all these teams are going to like Tommy Rees, but Marcus is not. You know what I mean? Like that's questioning Marcus's ability to evaluate talent. The fact is Marcus knew that continuity was going to be important. This is something he preached from the beginning. Continuity is important when you're inheriting a situation the way that he's inherited. Now, he's still going to want to do things his own way. But there's been a couple things that have been reported that I believe to be false. One is that Marcus wasn't allowed to bring in his own OC. Yeah, he was, because his own OC is the dude he hired to be the offensive coordinator. And the reason, and I said this in the beginning too, y'all have to remember how this all went down, right? Sean knows this. Part of the reason that people think this is because people believe some of the national reporting on the coaching search. When all the national people were saying it was going to be Luke Fickell, what was being said at Irish Breakdown? No. I'm telling you, Marcus Freeman is the guy that I think Notre Dame wants for this job. But they still needed to go through the interview process because Marcus had to show that he was the guy for that job. Because just being a great D coordinator doesn't mean that you're going to be a head coach. But that was, I think, ultimately from what my sources, that's ultimately what Jack was hoping would transpire. Jack's also didn't get to where he got to in life by rushing into decisions. He's going to be thorough. He's going to talk to other people. Just like here's another example, did the same thing with Brian Kelly. He wanted Brian Kelly to be the head coach, but there was two guys that he wanted to reach out to first before he made that decision. It's Kirk Ferentz and Bob Stoops. Threw an offer out, and they both said no, and he had Brian Kelly waiting right there. Right? So, I mean, if Nick Saban wanted to take the job, I don't think Marcus Freeman's the head coach at Notre Dame right now, right? Like, you know, but the point is, the reason that they negotiated with Mike Elston and Tom Rees when they did and not immediately is partly because they knew that that's who Marcus wanted. And as I've said before, you don't go from Luke Fickell's going to be the guy when it was reported to like 3 or 4 days later, you're hiring Marcus Freeman. Because I'm going to tell you right now, Luke Fickell never turned Notre Dame down. And if Jack Swarbrick went into the process saying, if Luke Fickell's my guy, I will wait for Luke Fickell. That was his thought going in. But very quickly it became, but Luke Fickell is not my guy. Marcus Freeman is my guy. And I think when we report it this way, we do a disservice to Marcus Freeman. As if Marcus had to hope that Tommy takes the job so he could become the head coach. If Jack Swarbrick thought that, he would have freaking hired Tommy Rees to be the head coach. Right? And so this is the whole thing that's frustrating this entire offseason, is there's just a lot of things that I think are being reported that are incorrect. And then people just take it and run with it. If Marcus Freeman wanted to, here's the other thing. If Marcus Freeman wanted a different offensive coordinator, don't you think he'd encourage Tommy Rees to take some of these jobs he's pursuing?
Well, see, this is where wordplay becomes, when people are reporting things, this is when wordplay becomes irresponsible, in my opinion. I'll look at it like this. You just laid everything out. And I think we talked about this, Malik and I talked about this. Do I think in the process, do I think Marcus Freeman was given or would have been given the same carte blanche as Luke Fickell? No. And that is what I wanted to get across. Because I know when the discussion took place, and it's like, yo, the confirmations for Rees and Elson took place before he got the job. Not so much, it wasn't like, Marcus, you have to take these two guys, that's non-negotiable. It was more like, you know what? We really like you. We want, for continuity's sake, we really think it would be smart if you kept these two guys on. Would you be cool with that? Marcus is like, yeah, I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
I like Tommy. I might not be as tight with Mike Elson. We sit on the plane next to each other, but yeah, I rock with both of them. Yeah, I can rock with both of those moving forward. Now, if you take Marcus Freeman, this is just me, from conversations I've had with people that work for certain networks and know them. If Marcus Freeman just had a clear slate it's a chance he might have taken Brian Hartline. It's a shot. A conversation would have taken place.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say that. A conversation would have taken place. Brian Hartline might have said no.
Mm-hmm.
All right. There was definitely another person in the NFL. I know for sure that a conversation would have taken place.
Mm-hmm.
But he was cool with being given the two guys for continuity's sake.
I don't think that's how it went down based on my sources at Notre Dame. Is that it wasn't like he was forced.
Well, let me stop that. The word given is wrong. The word given is wrong. I shouldn't have said given. There was a discussion about those two staying in place.
So if Tommy Rees was the offensive coordinator at Northwestern and Mike Elson was the D-line coach at Michigan, I don't know that Marcus Freeman would have gone to Jack Swarbrick and said, I want to go get Tommy Rees from Northwestern and Mike Elson from Michigan.
That's really all. That's
right.
All I'm trying to
But when he first started pursuing the job, according to my sources, Tommy Rees was the guy. He said, I want Tommy to stay and be my offensive coordinator. And I want to keep Mike Elson. Flat out. Just like he wanted to keep Mike Mickens. That'd be like saying he had Mike Mickens and Chris O'Leary thrust upon him.
those are his relationships.
The reason that Tommy and Mike Elson had their contracts negotiated is for one reason and one reason only. Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly wasn't trying to take Mike Mickens and Chris O'Leary. He was trying to take Tommy Rees and Mike Elston.
And that had absolutely
Mike Elston was in Louisiana, prepared to accept the job when Jack Swarbrick called him.
Yes.
If they didn't do it then and they waited until they hired Marcus Freeman, Mike Elston never would have been here. Now, hindsight being 2020, that might not have been a bad thing, right? Because he ultimately left. It would have been a bad thing for Tommy Rees because he didn't want to lose Tommy Rees. I'm just telling you, Marcus Freeman does not want to lose Tommy Rees. Why would he not want to lose a guy that he had thrust upon him in the first place? And I'm not saying what you said. I'm talking about the original comment.
But that's why I said the irresponsibility of people using certain words.
Right.
Changes.
So Marcus Freeman has been like, if you listen, here's the thing. You talk about reading things in context. Do you remember the comment he made about Mike Elston leaving for Michigan? I want to read what Coach Freeman said because
last Wednesday.
Yes, at the main press conference. I want to read you what Marcus Freeman said because it was a very telling comment in regards to the difference in how he handled that situation and what he has said about Tommy Rees and Dylan McCullough and people like that.
Absolutely.
Right? Because Sean, you know where I'm going with this one because I believe we talked about this.
I just said that, him and Tommy were good.
Right.
Mike Elson is like.
Right. I think he wanted to keep Mike because Mike was here and Mike's done a great job.
Mm-hmm.
But here's what he said. This is a question about Mike Elson leaving to go to Michigan. He said, I was surprised. I didn't expect it. But ultimately, I really care about Mike Elson. I want what is best for Mike Elston. If Mike Elson felt like going back to his alma mater to coach the D-line was what's best for him and his family, I could not do nothing but support him. That's what happened. We had a conversation. I said, hey, tell me what you want. Well, this is an opportunity that I really was intrigued by. I respect that, and I want to encourage and help in any way I can. I have also been told by my sources that Marcus Freeman never made a counteroffer. It was, hey, you know what? I respect that opportunity. That's a completely different situation than what's been going on with Tommy Rees, right? I mean, completely different situation. He's fighting to keep Tommy Rees. Yeah. That doesn't sound like he was fighting to keep that dude.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he didn't want him on his staff initially because Mike Elson did do a good job. But sometimes things happen where like, hey, look, this guy, my point being, if he didn't want to keep Tommy Rees as his offensive coordinator, why is he fighting so dang hard to keep him now? It's like, hey, because here's the thing. Brian Hartline is not leaving Ohio State for a lateral move. If Tommy Rees left, it's not a lateral move anymore. Now, we could argue whether or not that should be the guy he should call. I don't think it should be. I'd like to see him, prove a little bit more.
His horizon is a little bit bigger than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that would be. You don't think Brian Hartline's going to turn down being the receivers coach at Ohio State to come be the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame? I think he would.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. I'm sure the person in the NFL that you mentioned, that this would have been a golden opportunity. Because look, the Al Washington thing, like him and Al talked pretty quickly after Mike Elston. Like when Elston left, he already had some people that he was looking into. And it really came down to two guys, and it was that really were serious contenders. It was Al Washington and the guy that's at Ole Miss. And the reason he had another guy on the board is because he had to protect himself in case Al said no. But Al was the guy he wanted.
Yeah.
Al was also being pursued by Georgia and Florida. So it was about
away from Georgia was a huge deal.
Yes.
Too.
It was about, I want Al, but I can't just put all my eggs in Al's basket, because if he says no, I'm going to be screwed, not have a D-line coach. Al was the guy he wanted. Just like Harry Hiestand, there was other names involved with the O-line because it wasn't a given that they were going to be able to work through some contractual things to make it work with Harry Hiestand. Right. So you have to have other guys on the board. And so that's my whole point about this whole thing is there's the way it's the reason the timing of it happened wasn't because I'm thrusting Tommy Rees upon you. Here's the deal. If Jack Swarbrick had not decided, or at least had a good idea, that Marcus Freeman was going to be his head coach, there's no way in hell he signs Mike Elston and Tommy Rees to contracts, because he knows there's no way Luke Fickell is going to accept that. Right? I mean, that's the reality. Because as you said, Luke Fickell is going to get autonomy to keep whoever and bring in whoever he wants. Because you're not going to get him if you don't give him that. So you don't hire those two guys, but then say, hey, Marcus, if you don't want these guys, that's fine. We're going to go hire Luke Fickell. Because Marcus is smart enough to know this is the whole thing. It's like you're assuming these coaches aren't smart people to believe some of this stuff. Like Marcus Freeman coached with Luke Fickell. He played for Luke Fickell.
Yeah.
He knows darn well Luke Fickell's not going to have any coaches thrust upon him by anybody, because he's perfectly fine at Cincinnati. Luke Fickell's turned down some pretty good jobs to stay at Cincinnati, because there's one job ultimately that he wants, and it's Ohio State, right? So my whole thing is the timing of it had to do with LSU, not Marcus Freeman being thrust upon it. And I think when you run with this narrative that Freeman couldn't bring in his OC, you're creating drama where none exists. You're creating a problem where none exists. And look, if Marcus Freeman is smart, and Sean, I think you and I would agree that he is, he's not taking a job where he doesn't have some level of autonomy to hire coordinators, right? He would know, look, this isn't the right job. I'm 35 years old. I don't have to take this job.
Well, see, you just gave a look into, and this is where, once again, me just now really being connected to the program and coaches a little bit deeper.
Mm-hmm.
You're listening to Jack Swarbrick, and you're listening to Jack Swarbrick explain why he did what he did. And as he explains it, he's not explaining it in connection with ongoing conversations with Marcus Freeman. He's explaining, this is why I wanted to keep Tommy and Mike Elston for continuity.
Mm-hmm.
We needed that based upon the way things went down. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what you're explaining is things operating in concert. Like this is happening, but this is also happening.
Right.
Marcus had already made it known, yo, I want the job.
Right.
Right? In that conversation and saying he wants the job, let me tell you something. You just said Marcus Freeman is smart. Marcus Freeman is smart enough to research the company he wants to work for and be employed by. And the best way for him is to know who on that staff probably needs to stay. Because that's what you're supposed to do when you interview for a job. You research the company that you're about to interview with to know how to sell yourself to them.
Sean, you know this in the NFL. Coaches will go interview and say, hey, I'm going to bring this guy, and he's not really going to bring those guys.
Right.
But he knows the GM or the owner of these interviewing with. Ooh, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So he knew he had done, maybe he knew some people on the board that knew Jack.
Right.
That knew
Jack loves Tommy Rees.
Jack loves Tommy Rees like dude. So that's why my statement was, if he just had total autonomy, like Luke Fickell, things might have been different. Or if you said Tommy was at Northwestern,
or Marcus was somewhere else. Let's say
yeah,
Marcus was still the D coordinator at Cincinnati, it might have been different,
yeah,
right? So, but that's the thing is that's not what the circumstances were. The circumstances were he did work with Marcus and I mean with Tommy and Mike Elson and Mike Mickens and Chris O'Leary the last year.
yeah,
Right? He did work with them.
yeah.
Uh,
They were Tommy and Mike Elston were part of the ongoing conversation.
right. And the relationship that he had with Tommy is the primary reason, along with knowing that Tommy is well respected in Notre Dame, are reasons why that's who Marcus wanted to be his offensive coordinator. Now, Marcus also knows that probably Tommy's not going to be here super long, right? And I'm just telling you, if Marcus didn't want to, let's have some common sense here, right? If Marcus didn't ultimately want Tommy Rees to be at Notre Dame and be his offensive coordinator, he's had multiple outs.
Oh man. And like you just said, he fought, in his own words, he fought to keep one
Right.
and allowed the other one to walk out with his blessing.
Yeah. Yeah. He said if he didn't want Tommy Rees here, Tommy wouldn't be here.
So
right? He'd be at Miami or in the NFL or Oregon or something else.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be here because Mark said, hey, because look, Marcus can make it known, like, hey, look, man, you got to do what you got to do. He could do exact same thing that he handled the way he handled the mic. And I would, that's not just what Marcus said, Sean. You and I talked about that immediately. I called you because you and I knew about this a week before it became public.
Yeah.
And I said, and I said to you, I said, he's not fighting to keep him. I told you that then. And I had pretty good sourcing on it. Yeah. You know who my source was on that?
Mm-hmm.
It was, he said, hey, man, you got to do what you got to do, buddy. I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
Right? That's not what he said when the rumblings about Tommy. It was, I need to keep this guy here. I want to keep this guy here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if he had somebody else in mind that he wants right now to be his OC, the autonomy thing, because the thing is that Marcus wanted him there because he had worked with him. When I talk about him being at Northwestern or Michigan, it's because he would have had no relationship with those guys. So, of course, he's not going to go hire 29-year-old Tommy Rees from Northwestern. He has no relationship with him.
Yeah.
But now he's seen him on a day-to-day basis. And it just like that's why Tommy chose to stay. That's the other thing, too, is let's not forget that if Tommy didn't have same level of respect for Marcus, that no one wants to ascribe to him now because he's butthurt about the tight end thing, which, again, I think is being blown way out of proportion. I can be annoyed about something and then quickly – I mean, you ever had a fight with your wife? You stop loving her the next day? No, I disagree with you. We're going to have it out now, and then we move on. That happens in coaching and business too, right? But the point is, when you look at this, Marcus Freeman has to have a level of respect for Tommy Rees to have wanted him here, to have let it be known he wanted him here, and then to have fought to keep him here. Like Marcus got to be the dumbest dude in the world if he doesn't want Tommy Rees and then he goes and fights to keep him here. It's like, this guy's not real bright. This guy's not going to be successful. No, he did that because that's who he wants right now.
Yeah.
And so just some of the stuff, like you have to not have common sense to believe some of the stuff that's been reported to the degree that it's being apparently reported.
That is being reported.
And so, a lot of it just doesn't make sense. It does. And Tommy's not staying if there's not a level of respect for Marcus. He'd have taken the money and ran to LSU or to Miami. It's a mutual respect that those two have. Mutual respect doesn't mean you always agree. Mutual respect doesn't mean you always are going to be happy with decisions that the other one makes. But you respect that person enough to say, yeah, I don't agree with it, but let's roll. Okay. But it doesn't mean that's your immediate reaction. You can go piss and moan for 24 hours. And then when you come back tomorrow, let's get ready to rock and roll. And this was the first time that Michael Mayer catches one pass in the open against Ohio State. That's because Tommy Rees doesn't like the tight ends coach. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to keep playing this drama. At the end of the day, Marcus Freeman wanted this job. Marcus Freeman wanted Tommy to be his OC. Tommy wants to be at Notre Dame. If those things weren't true, Tommy doesn't want to be here, or Marcus doesn't want him here. Guess what, folks? Tommy's gone.
By the way, you just mentioned that was another clunky answer. His answer about Jared Parker.
But I think too is, let's be honest, we know the circumstance there.
Yeah.
Our ears, our antennas go up when we hear Jared Parker's name specifically asked.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know, because I don't get into that one. But here's a couple other questions that we have because we need to get out of here. Charlie Weiss's last belt with my issue with Tommy Rees is he's flying around on the private plane, but where is the offensive recruit results? I know it takes time, but come on. Love IB, love Lucky Lefty podcast. Hey, Sean, do you know how many offensive recruits that Alabama has committed in the 2023 class?
Speak on this, because I will say this. The reason is not fair because the defensive class are locked in because of Marcus Freeman.
And the fact that they've had to really only replace one coach from last year's defensive staff.
Absolutely. So and
they've got good recruiters around him on that side of the ball.
And it's easier to get, no disrespect, pulling a quarterback, which is huge in the dominoes of the rest of the offensive class.
Right.
It's totally different than getting paid. It's different. Defensive guys, when they know what they know. I think I read an article today talking about the IMG Combine that was yesterday. Samuel Mpemba was asked, what his thoughts on Notre Dame. He was flat out like, yo, Marcus Freeman, that's my guy.
Yeah, that was on the IB message board.
Yeah. Marcus Freeman, that's my dude. That's my guy. From the Florida guy. Mm-hmm. I forget his name. I'm sorry.
Brian Smith.
John? No, it wasn't
Brian
John.
Smith.
Brian Smith.
Yeah.
And hearing that, you're like, yo, defensive guys, they jump on quick. Offensive guys, quarterbacks, the prima donnas, if you will. Look at the top. Is it the top 5 quarterbacks still are unsigned?
There's one that's committed.
Malachi.
Malachi. To USC.
Yeah.
Arch is uncommitted. Dante's uncommitted. Nico's uncommitted. Vizina's uncommitted.
Yep. So it's like when it comes to quarterbacks, though, they're not going to commit, like you said, until the spring.
But I also think there's 2 things I want to add to this, Sean. Number one is, let's not forget the leadership at Notre Dame on defense has not changed during all this stuff. It's still Marcus Freeman.
Yeah.
The leadership on offense changed to a degree from a perception standpoint when Brian Kelly left.
Yeah.
Also, it's like the analogy we used last week, right? We kind of use that Captain America analogy, where in the past, Tommy Rees was kind of like that scene in Endgame where Thor's knocked out, Iron Man's knocked out, and everybody else is blipped. Ant-Man and Hulk have been buried in the rubble, and it's just Cap and that whole army. Yeah. But he puts this thing on, and I'm still going to go battle, right? Because that's what I got to do. That's my job. I'm Captain America, right? And that was Tommy, beat up, put the broken shield on, and I'm at it alone. Because he had a crap recruiter as a receivers coach. His offensive line coach was a good recruiter, but didn't have the same reputation, so they missed on a lot of their top targets. The best offensive lineman they signed in this class is a guy that Tommy Rees went out and got after the other coach was known that he was gone. Let's not forget that. The tight ends coach was good, but it sells itself. But if you're trying to go out there and get top quarterbacks, and you're trying to go out there and get top receivers, and you've got the mess of Brian Kelly ahead of you, and you've got Dell Alexander, you're Captain America with a broken shield, right? But then you go out and you hire Deland, you hire Heastan, and you hire Chancey, and you hire Jared Parker, whether you like them or not. And now your head coach is Marcus Freeman. Now all of a sudden it's the scene is like Cap on your left, right? And then the thing opens up and Black Panther walks through and all of Wakanda's behind him. And then Wong shows up with all the sorcerers, you know what I mean? Asgard shows up with Valkyrie, right? Yeah. And it's like, and then all of a sudden at the very end, Harry Heastan, aka Ant-Man, busts through the building with Hulk and Rocket. You know what I'm saying? That's Tommy now. Now I'm ready to go to battle.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And the other thing is context. Alabama has 1 commit in their entire class. Ohio State has 3 offensive players committed, and they've only got 5 kids committed in the entire class. 2 of the 3 they have 2 offensive linemen and a tight end.
Yeah.
2 of those kids are in-state players, right? Notre Dame has 9 commitments, partly because of, like you said, Marcus Freeman, and the defensive staff is largely still intact. Now, they hired 2 new coaches, but only because the defensive coordinator got promoted to head coach. That guy's still there.
He's still there.
You've now have 1 extra defensive guy basically now. and where offensively you've had all this turnover at coaching staff,
And
and you had
that's
pretty
bigger, right?
incompetent, some couple incompetent guys there to begin with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Especially
Yeah.
Coach Alexander.
Yeah.
So it's we need some context here to this whole thing,
I like
right?
how you slid that in.
Yeah, I'm just saying. But I just, again, I think that's another example of people kind of looking at it and looking for a reason to, you know,
And really, I mean, how many? Let's be honest. There are far more. If you look at the ESPN Top 100 or Rivals Top 100, you'll see a lot more defensive players committed than you will offensive
yes,
players.
yes,
It's just the way it is in recruiting. Now, I
right.
will say this: I feel like this time next year, because the staff will have been in place,
Right.
the ratio will probably be a little bit
A little bit more
different.
balanced.
9-0.
Yeah. Look, 7-2, 7-2.
Oh, 7-2. Yeah.
Right.
I'm sorry.
That's the other thing we forget. There are 2 offensive players committed to this class.
It's just not the
Right?
guys that everybody.
And at what positions? At the 2 positions where we actually had decent coaches.
Yes. Yes.
It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence, folks.
Yeah.
So I just say, just patience. Let's let it. If we're sitting here at the end of the summer and they still haven't really added anybody good on offense, so we can have a conversation about it. This may not be a good thing, but I think that's taking a preconceived feeling about something and then looking for reasons to justify. Oh, see, look, nope, not enough commits. Yep, he's not doing a good job, right? I mean, Alabama flew all over the country for recruiting, and they got 1 guy committed. Could it also be, and this is a rhetorical question, Sean, that part of the reason Notre Dame doesn't have more commits is because in this offensive staff, Tommy Rees is shooting for some big fish.
Finally.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah. And
those
guys are going to take time.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, that's the other thing too.
It's almost like, as a fan base, we can't ask to go after the big fish and then get mad and impatient with the scheduling of the big fish and when they
which has always been true.
It's been the case all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So just be patient.
Yeah.
Right. And I would say give all these coaches an opportunity to prove themselves and all of them, whatever you think the circumstances are. And judge Tommy, because Tommy Rees has not done anything to get some of the vitriol that he's gotten from Notre Dame fans. But we're also not going to sit here and say he's above reproach. And when he needs to be criticized, we will criticize him like we will do to Marcus Freeman, like we will do to every other coach on the staff. That's what we do, right? But we also, I mean, Tom Rees has done some pretty good things in Notre Dame too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I say is like Brian Kelly's gone. However you feel, because I did not support him being hired at that time. But I also said it's going to pay off down the road. It hurt you for 2020, and you missed an opportunity in 2020. That team had a chance to be better than it was if you would have handled some business right going into that season pre-COVID. I think COVID changed some things a little bit for everybody, but pre-COVID, there just was a better hire to make.
Yeah.
But we said at the time, but in 2 years, we're going to look back and say it was the wrong hire then, but it's going to end up being beneficial down the road. And we're entering that mode now.
The one blessing that came out of the hiring of Marcus Freeman grabbed the attention of recruits, even recruits that didn't even have Notre Dame on their radar. It grabbed the attention of recruits, and even if they were offensive recruits that I'll say is one. I know one recruit in particular that was on the verge of committing when Marcus Freeman was hired to another school and stopped when he saw that hire. And Notre Dame got back in the swing of things with that particular recruit.
Yeah.
So, look.
I'm going to say one thing on top of that too, Sean, that goes along with that. I made the joke, the end game thing, but here's the deal. They do have a much better recruiting staff now. If you would have filled up with some kids that are good players, but not elite players, you'd have less room to go get those elite players. Yeah. Because you'd have other guys.
Yeah.
That's just a fact. And if you look around the country, a lot of the schools that have got commitments, they're kids that are either from the state that they're in or the bordering states.
Yeah.
That's the other part too.
Yeah.
And what makes Notre Dame's class so unique this early is the fact that that's not the case for Notre Dame. And there's Drake Bowen from Indiana, right? But you've got Keon Keeley and there's Brendan Vernon from Ohio, but that's a little bit unique because Ohio is not a place you usually get top players.
Right.
But you got Keon Keeley from Florida. You've got Peyton Bowen from Texas. You've got Cooper Flanagan from California. You've got Don Schuler from Jersey. You've got Preston Zinter from Massachusetts. You've got it's a different Cedric Irvin from Miami.
Yep.
I mean, you've got 2 kids committed from the state of Florida. I'm actually going to check something out here real quick, Sean, because I just thought of something really funny.
With a chance to get another 2.
Notre Dame has as many kids committed in its class from Florida as Miami does right now. Notre Dame has more kids in its class right now committed from Florida than Florida does.
Yeah.
Which is 0.
Yeah.
I mean, Notre Dame is way ahead of schedule. Notre Dame's 2020, let me say this, the 2021 class did not get their 9th commitment till June.
Yeah. Say that again, Brian.
Notre Dame did not get its 9th commitment in the 2021 class, Blake Fisher's class, until June.
Yeah.
Last year it was like mid-March.
Yeah.
So, yes. So yes, Florida State is the only team from Florida with more Florida kids committed than Notre Dame, and they have 3. Notre Dame has 2. They have more than Florida. Yeah. They have more than Miami. They have as many as Miami. Florida State has 3, and 2 of those kids are 3-star recruits. I'm just saying.
Let us reiterate as well. You talked about Preston Zinter when you said they had a kid from Lawrence, Massachusetts. A lot of people kind of asked the question, like, why did they take this kid? Well, number one, he plays a position that the head coach knows how to evaluate and says, this kid is pretty good. I don't care where.
And went and saw in person.
Yes. He's pretty good. And once again, we talked about, if this is Brian, we know over the last 5 years, we know kids that have been, I don't want to say throw-ins.
Yeah, settled.
Yeah, there you go. Settled in the class. This is not a settled kid.
Right.
But right now, amongst the 9 recruits, where would you rank him?
8th.
There you go. So now you're talking about quality.
Right. He's a 4-star kid. Yeah.
You're talking about quality.
According to Rivals, 5 of Notre Dame's 9 commitments are top 100 players.
Yes.
The next highest team, like in their rank, like their top 5, is Georgia. Only has 6 total commits. Notre Dame has 5 in the top 100. Guys, they're fine. I do want to say this. Apparently, Sean, as we wrap up, it's my fault that there's aren't more offensive commits. Because Michael Campbell says we don't have more commits on offense because they were not sent Irish Breakdown swag items. So it is my fault. I apologize to everyone. If it wasn't an NCAA violation, I would take care of that right now.
You're not sending out the treat bags like you're supposed to?
I dropped the ball. I was either hire you or use that money to go send out gear and merch, and I chose to hire you. So,
well, I could throw it back on IB Nation and say, look, if you guys super chat us, we'll create a
sign up for the message board. If we get, you know what I mean? I mean, there you go. So, Michael, thank you for the comedic relief. Sean, this was a fun show, man. I can't believe we went almost 4 hours. It's insane.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of fun. Hey, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share, sign up for the message board, people. You are missing out on a ton of great information. A lot of great discussion. We need you on the message boards. You can find it at boards.irishbreakdown.com. If you're listening via podcast, give us a 5-star review. And, of course, check out the merch store. Michael talks about that. He made a joke about the Irish Breakdown swag items. But, hey, those things are for sale. Sean and I had a conversation. He's a little upset with his missus today because she went and ran some errands with the IB hat in the back of the car. Like, you got to check that. You got to check that. But that ultimately is my fault because you can't have just one IB hats on. So you and I will have a little conversation about this after the show. We got to get you some more IB gear. So we'll get that taken care of. Maybe get you like a flag to hang up in the background. You know what I mean?
You know what?
So,
I'm jealous of you and Ryan. I did feel kind of left out.
Yeah.
Like where's my flag?
Well, I got to get, but I kind of felt like you got this kind of sweet, book. I said that right because he had like a white wall behind him. You know what I mean? Like we got to get you some. Vince has got that green monstrosity behind him, and I was like, dude, I gotta do something to kind of distract from that. You know what I mean? So but yeah, we'll chat after we're done here. We'll chat. We'll gotta get you some more gear for sure. But you can find that at the Irish Breakdown, obviously the merch store, which you can find on our site, I think it's store.irishbreakdown.com. Tons of stuff going on. If you like Built Bars, best protein bars in the business. I have literally not bought a candy bar since I got a Built Bar. You use the promo code Irish Breakdown promo code. You just click on the link below. You get 10% off your entire purchase. So a lot going on, Sean. So hey, buddy, thank you for being with us for installment 2.
Another great show coming up next Saturday.
A lot of fun. Yeah. Yeah.
We
that's right.
already know the topic.
That's right. It's about Coach Stuckey, right?
Yeah.
The receiver core. Yeah. So Sean wrote an article at irishbreakdown.com today where he talked about his comments from Coach Stuckey, and it was just like music to my ears. He's talking about like the diverse. Basically, it's about diversity within his receiving core. He wants different types of players, which I was like, thank you, Jesus. I mean, y'all know I've been begging for that for years, but kind of get into who fits those positions on the roster and who fits those positions on the receiving core.
Yeah.
And should he have that type of outlook? And what does that look like? Because he used a basketball analogy. You got to check it out. It's on irishbreakdown.com. Used a basketball analogy to explain it. I was like, that's really okay. Dig that. I dig that. So we're going to talk about that next week. That'll be our next topic of conversation. And if we talk about something else, it means something went down between now and then. So hopefully we're not talking about that, because if something goes down recruiting wise, we'll do it that day. That's not what we're talking about. It means something else went down that we need to talk about. So Sean, thanks for joining me today. Absolutely. Everybody else, thank all of you for joining us today. It's a lot of fun. We will talk to you again here very, very soon.
Have a great weekend, everybody.